Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tess Richey. Tess Richey was the youngest of 5 sisters, born on November 30th, 1994. She spent her childhood in North Bay before moving to Toronto at the age of 19. According to her sister Verina, Tess loved her life, dogs, and family. She worked as a waitress in Toronto, but her dream job was to become a flight attendant and travel the world. Although Tess struggled to find a job she liked, her family was always willing to support her financially. Some sources suggest that after failing to find work at an airline or hotel, she began learning Italian and searching for job opportunities in Italy online. Tess also created content on YouTube, with her last video uploaded on February 23, 2014, nearly 4 years before the events we will discuss. In that video, Tess shared her personal experiences and the challenges she faced. Tess explained that she searched everywhere for someone who would understand and relate to what she was experiencing, but she never found that. She said her boyfriend's physical abuse is never acceptable, no matter how minor it may seem. She stated that he hit her, and even downplaying it as just throwing a purse at her is embarrassing because it happened in his bedroom, and it's a sad reality. After recording this video, Tess mentioned that she faced more personal struggles. In 2017, she experienced a devastating breakup with her boyfriend Julian on November 23rd. The next day, she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was not only 8 years older, but also her closest confidant. Tess recounted that she spent most of November 24th at Rachel's house in Toronto, where they discussed her breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. Rachel had to encourage her to eat dinner because she had lost her appetite due to stress. Despite her emotional state, Tess made plans to meet an old school friend, Riley Samar, that night. Samar was from North Bay, and she had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. They hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tango, a well-known drag bar in the church in Wellesley area, that evening. Rachel's partner arranged for Richey to take an Uber to meet Samar downtown. Richey saw her sister Tess running out to catch the Uber, which was the last time she would ever see her alive. Richey arrived at the Cruise and Tango club around midnight, but Samar wasn't there yet. The club was packed, and Tess sent a text to her sister to let her know she had arrived safely. The next morning, Richey sent a text to her sister, not expecting a quick response since Tess had been out late the night before. However, by 6:30 p.m., Richey still hadn't heard back from Tess. She then discovered that none of her texts had been delivered to Tess's phone. When Richey tried calling, the calls went straight to voicemail. Their mother, Christine Hermiston, also attempted to contact Tess, but her phone was turned off. Christine got a notification that her daughter Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m., but then the ride was canceled. This happened because Tess had used Christine's credit card to set up her Uber account, so Christine received updates on all of Tess's Uber rides. When Christine and her family couldn't reach Tess during the day and her phone stayed off, they started to worry because Tess always kept in touch with them. Rachel typically kept her phone with her at all times. On Saturday night around 9 p.m., she asked her partner to check on her sister's apartment in Scarborough while she reached out to her friends. Tess was still missing, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Rachel began calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the following evening, the police had no updates for Tess's family. Multiple officers were assigned to search for Tess Richey, but no one had seen or heard from her in the past 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to help with the search. They distributed flyers featuring Tess's picture, hoping someone might recognize her. The family did everything they could, but unfortunately, the police's investigation into Tess's disappearance was lacking. Meanwhile, Tess's friend Riley, who had gone to the bar with her that night, returned home safely. When asked about Tess's whereabouts, Riley mentioned that they had both been drinking heavily, which led to the bar's security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 a.m. and headed to Wellesley Street to grab a bite to eat. On their way, they met a guy who decided to join them, but Riley couldn't remember his name. Once on Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess asked for a vegetarian hot dog, which led to a disagreement with the vendor. Tess thought she received a meat hot dog, and Riley noted that Tess accidentally sprayed mustard all over the vendor's cart. After that, Tess, Riley, and their new companion ran to Dundonald Street. There, they encountered a woman named Michelle on her porch and struck up a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. Tess confided in Michelle about her recent breakup and how difficult it had been for her. Michelle offered her support, and they even exchanged phone numbers. Michelle observed that Richey seemed to be trying to enjoy himself, but when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a deep sadness. The breakup with Julian seemed to be affecting Riley heavily. Riley reassured her that things would improve and encouraged her to stay strong. At 4 a.m., Riley got a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and headed towards Yonge Street before going home. Tess felt let down that Riley had left so early. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber, suggesting that she decided to go home too after Riley left. The Uber driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess was not there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just a day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine began handing out flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where Tess was last seen. Since Riley had separated from Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to investigate that area. She reached out to Anne Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, knowing their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they began searching for Richey as efforts intensified and social media campaigns aimed to find her. During this time, Brazo made a chilling discovery while looking into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell at a construction site located at 582 Church Street. She immediately recognized Richey's body lying on the concrete. "I was in complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't understand what I was seeing," said Anne, fighting back tears. Feeling frightened, she noticed dust from a nearby gravel pile settled on Richey's body. Brazo let go of the staircase railing and stepped back down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Meanwhile, Hermiston was further up the sidewalk, unaware that her daughter's body was so near. Brazo called out to her, "Christine, come back here. There's a girl in the stairwell. You need to come back." Hermiston turned and ran down the driveway, stopping suddenly at the stairwell. After a few moments, she began to scream, pleading with God for assistance. Tess's death presented a heartbreaking event for her entire family. They discovered her body only 300 yards from the bar where she had been before disappearing, and just 20 yards from the last place her friend Riley saw her. This situation raised many questions about the police's response, especially since her body had been found just a couple of blocks from the bar. After Anne and Christine located Tess's body, an anonymous police source shared new information with the media. It was reported that Tessa had advertised her intimate services online and had worked at a strip club. Tessa's mother stated that the Toronto police did not adequately search for Richey because they assumed she was an escort. This assumption was horrifying to Hermiston, who expressed her anger at the media's portrayal. After Richey's body was found, police sources claimed she was involved in the sex trade, which Hermiston called a blatant lie. They spread this information to suggest she led a high-risk lifestyle, deflecting blame from themselves. Although Tess briefly worked as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after starting. The mention of intimate services was linked to a dating site account, not a profession. Despite the discovery of Richey's body, the circumstances of her death remained unclear. Initially, police did not suspect foul play, but the homicide unit took over when an autopsy indicated she had died from neck compression. Additionally, they discovered seminal fluid on her clothing and saliva on her bra. DNA tests revealed male DNA, prompting police to begin searching for a suspect. Based on Riley's testimony, detectives aimed to identify the man Tess had met that night, as he was the person she spent time with after Riley went home. The police examined CCTV footage to gather information about that night. The video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and heading towards a hot dog vendor. There were also cameras on the building near where Anne discovered the body. After reviewing the recordings, the police observed Tess and an unidentified man walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. A subsequent recording taken 46 minutes later showed the man leaving the location alone, with no further footage of Tess. This led the police to consider him the main suspect in the Tess Richey case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police released images of him obtained from the surveillance footage. They hoped that someone would be able to identify him. The police discovered the identity of the man after seeing the published images. He called the police station himself and stated that he was the guy in the photo. The person who was with Tess that night was identified as 21-year-old Colin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 years old and living with his parents and younger brother in their home in North Toronto. He had completed a year of postgraduate studies to become a car mechanic and was working with his father in construction. Schlatter, along with his parents and one of his lawyers, visited the police station where he spoke briefly with detectives but chose not to testify. But finally, they provided the police with important evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter discarded an empty water bottle in a trash can. The police took the bottle and sent it for forensic analysis. After some time, they found that the DNA on the bottle matched DNA samples taken from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Richey's body, indicating that they came from the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to observe Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results sped up their timeline. Schlatter was arrested at approximately 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at a cinema. He was taken to the 13th Division and placed in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. Two other men were in holding cells next to him, both of whom were undercover police officers. Schlatter was unaware that he was about to provide them with a significant amount of evidence. The three men were in plain holding cells, each containing a combination toilet, sink, and bed. In the cell, Schlatter discussed his love for card games and claimed he had a knack for attracting women. He bragged about having slept with over 40 women, even though he was only 21. Schlatter did not encounter Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He saw them for the first time in the same bar where he was present. This recording was made just before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Schlatter also spoke to undercover officers about Tess. Initially, he claimed she was alive when he departed. However, he later suggested that something might have happened because alcohol had clouded his memory. He doubted his own capability. The police charged Ken Schlatter with the murder of Tess Richey, but he denied the accusation. In June 2018, police officers Alan McCullough and Michael Jones were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The report of hearing stated that they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the nearby property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and inform a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. During the 2020 trial of Ken Schlatter, his defense argued that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building, thus avoiding the cameras. The lawyers even named another suspect, but the police thoroughly investigated and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Ken Schlatter. Schlatter, a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court, explained that he has a speech defect, causing him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. He claimed that Tess offered him a place to hide from prying eyes at 4:02 a.m., which explained the presence of his DNA on her belongings. Tess Richey had ordered an Uber, but when the driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., she wasn't there. Instead, Calvin Schlatter approached her again. They sat down on a bench at the corner of street. Schlatter stated that Tess seemed upset after their argument, so he went over to check on her. Schlatter claimed Tess asked him to sit and talk, but with no audio on security videos, it can't be confirmed. He said she was upset about her breakup, so he shared a similar experience to comfort her. Schlatter claimed that later, Tess asked if it was okay to kiss him. He said they stood up, hugged, and kissed each other. However, there is no footage of this kiss on the available CCTV footage. Schlatter claims that Tess Richey asked him to accompany her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and then down the outdoor stairwell. However, the prosecution questioned his motives, as an Uber driver was waiting for Tess at the time. It is unclear what Schlatter said to Tess to persuade her to walk with him into the darkness at 4 a.m. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, and he ejaculated in his pants. He wanted to take things further, but Tess refused. Schlatter states that after this, he invited Tess to his house, but she declined and told him to leave. He claims that he left, and Tess was alive when he departed. There were only 2 people who knew the truth about the events of that night. Unfortunately, one of them had already passed away. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 key witnesses, Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tepp, a woman who had spoken with Tess and Schlatter that night. Both Riley and Michelle identified Schlatter. In addition to talking to 2 undercover police officers, Schlatter is also alleged to have shared important details with a cellmate, known only as ES due to a publication ban, when they were both being held at a Toronto detention center for about 2 months in 2018. ES has a long history of criminal activity, including multiple break-ins and a domestic assault. The informant, who shared a cell with Calvin Schlatter, initially felt sympathetic towards Schlatter because he was a young man experiencing imprisonment for the first time. However, as time passed, his opinion of Schlatter changed. Schlatter would often cry himself to sleep, claiming he didn't want to serve his sentence and missing his mother. Despite this, Schlatter showed no regret when discussing the death of Tess Richey. According to him, Schlatter admitted to kissing Richey and losing control when she refused to go further, ultimately strangling her with a scarf. In court, Schlatter denied having these conversations with the informant, and his lawyer portrayed the informant as a deceitful liar. Nevertheless, physical evidence suggests that Richey was strangled, and only Schlatter's DNA was found on her clothing. In her final statement to the jury, defense attorney Lydia Riva presented her client, Schlatter, as a harmless and innocent young man. She acknowledged that it can be difficult to accept, but the criminal justice system is not infallible and can sometimes make mistakes. On March 23, 2020, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Schlatter to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The trial was emotionally devastating for Richey's family and supporters, who were often left reeling and in tears in the courtroom. Tess's death has left the family feeling guilty and broken, struggling to look at each other. They're seeking $20 million in damages, including punitive damages, to ensure justice for their daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alicia Canales McGuire. Alicia was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Her passion was helping others, which led her to work as a caregiver for most of her adult life. Growing up on a farm, Alicia learned the value of hard work from a young age, starting to work at just 5 years old. She often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Spending time with her family was crucial to Alicia, and she made it a point to regularly visit and call them, always remembering to express her love when saying goodbye. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradle. Alicia lived in the house her sister Amanda's home, where Amanda lived with her 3 children. When Amanda had to travel to New York for work, she asked Alicia to watch her kids during her absence. Alicia was happy to help care for her nephew and nieces. One night, a nanny staying in the house with her called 911 after waking up to the sound of gunshots. When the nanny went downstairs, she found Alicia lying motionless at the front door. The police officers who arrived at the scene first secured the house to ensure the perpetrator was not still inside. They carefully checked every room, confirming that only the nanny and the children were present. Once the children were safely removed from the house, the police began searching for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had stood next to the car right before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's body was lying face down just outside the door. The police found no signs of a robbery, as the house was not in disarray, and it appeared that the perpetrator had not entered the house at all. The detectives were left wondering who would want to kill Alicia and why. When they discovered that the crime scene was her sister's house, they considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Maybe Amanda, Alicia's sister, was the intended target, but she was safely in New York at the time. The investigators turned to the nanny, who was also in the house during the shooting, for answers. After calming down, she was able to provide some information. She told them that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots, and when she looked down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. Unfortunately, she didn't see the shooter. She mentioned that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Upon reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the detectives discovered that this was not the first call to the address, with all previous incidents related to domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. The detectives focus on this particular testimony. They located Kevin Lewis's home address in another part of Everett and paid him a visit before dawn. His house was dark, and when they knocked on the door, Kevin answered. During their conversation, the officers asked if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. Appearing disheveled as if he had just woken up, the detectives asked Kevin to account for his whereabouts the previous night. He claimed to have stayed at home and stated that his sister and mother could vouch for his alibi. Notably, he didn't ask why the detectives were visiting him. When detectives told Kevin that a shooting had occurred at the house where his children lived, he showed no emotional response, which was unusual. As a parent, he should have asked about his children's well-being, but he remained silent. However, when they informed him that Amanda was out of town on business, he expressed surprise, saying "really," and the conversation ended there. The detectives decided to investigate further by reviewing footage from surveillance cameras at neighboring houses. They wanted to verify Kevin's alibi that he had stayed home all night. They saw a car stopped near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. A person resembling Kevin then exited the house, got into the car, and drove away a few moments later. Although the footage was not clear enough to confirm it was definitely Kevin, the detectives continued to review additional camera footage. They took a closer look at the car, but that didn't help identify it. All they could determine was that it was a light-colored vehicle. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. This time, they noticed a crucial detail. The front right rim was different from the others. While the 3 other rims were light in color, the front right one was dark. The car stopped near Kevin Lewis's house, and the same person who had gotten out of the car earlier got out again and went back inside. Whoever this person was, they entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and didn't come back. Since it was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house, it's possible that the car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. However, it was too early to say whether this car was involved in the shooting at all. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later, when their father called her in New York to break the news. When investigators asked Amanda, a key witness, if she thought her ex-husband Kevin was responsible for Alicia's murder, she was adamant that he was the one. Although Amanda's 8-year marriage to Kevin Lewis ended, she struggled to acknowledge the toxic nature of their relationship. Despite their divorce in June 2017, Amanda lived in fear of Kevin, who had physically abused her in the past, leaving her with bruises. After their separation, Kevin continued to threaten her. In August 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of their 3 young children, and Kevin was ordered to provide $800 in monthly support instead of child support. This marked a fresh start for Amanda, who focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and was grateful for the support of her family as a single mother. Kevin, a former military man, threatened to kill Amanda, and she took him seriously due to his training. Believing she was the target, Amanda obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated it multiple times. He would often lurk around her house, peeking through the windows, which terrified not only Amanda, but also her 3 children. Despite the violations, Kevin was never charged by the police. Weeks before her sister's tragic death, Amanda was brutally beaten in her own driveway. She was getting out of her car late one night when someone launched a surprise attack. Although the assault happened quickly and she didn't see the attacker's face, Amanda was convinced that Kevin was behind it. Investigators believe 30-year-old Kevin Lewis is the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia. They think he intended to kill his ex-wife, but he was unaware that she was in New York at the time. Unbeknownst to him, Amanda had asked Alicia to babysit her children while she was away. However, there's a problem with this theory. If Kevin was the person in the footage, it would mean he was at his home during the shooting. Moreover, his sister and mother have provided him with a solid alibi. As a result, the police have continued their investigation, exploring alternative explanations for the crime. They returned to Amanda's house to re-examine the crime scene and track the path of the bullets. The investigation revealed that Alicia was shot when the door was only partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, which entered the interior. The evidence suggests that the shooter stood next to the garage and fired, then moved towards the door and fired again from inside. The medical examiner determined that Alicia died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the wounds showed signs of gunpowder residue, indicating close-range shots. While the examiner couldn't determine the exact order of the 5 shots, they believe the last 2 head wounds were likely the final 2 inflicted. Furthermore, experts concluded that the 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same gun. Alicia's head wounds were caused by close-range bullet shots. The investigators explored the possibility of a personal motive behind her murder, but found no evidence to support this theory. The shell casings discovered at the crime scene were a rare Russian-made brand called Tul Ammo, which gave the police hope of tracing the seller and buyer. The police learned that Walmart had sold the 9mm Tul Ammo cartridges and had CCTV footage of the purchase. Upon reviewing the footage recorded 2 days before Alicia's death, they initially suspected Kevin Lewis as the buyer. However, the footage revealed a different person who paid using a credit card. The police identified this individual, but found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alicia, or the nanny. The investigation thus required new leads and evidence. Amanda was questioned by investigators about her relationship with Kevin. She revealed that their relationship started well, but Kevin eventually became aggressive and violent, leading to their divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite this, Amanda believed that she was the intended target of the shooting that killed Alicia. not Alicia herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but investigators knew that Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. Upon re-examining the footage from the night of Alicia's death, investigators noticed something they had previously overlooked. The low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving his house and getting into the back seat of a car behind the driver. This raised questions, as most people would typically sit in the front passenger seat. The likely explanation was that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat, meaning there were probably two people in the car by the time it arrived at Kevin's house. This new evidence didn't directly link Kevin to Alicia's death, but it did contribute to the growing case against him for attacking his ex-wife Amanda. In November 2018, Kevin was arrested and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over a year had passed since Alicia's tragic death, yet her case remained a mystery. However, a breakthrough finally came in 2019 when the police station received a crucial call from a woman with vital information. The caller claimed to have met a girl named Angelica at a party in nearby Spokane, who boasted about being hired to commit a murder on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given the significant distance of 5 hours between Spokane and Everett. According to the caller, Angelica had proudly shared details about how she and her boyfriend were involved in the crime. Alexis Hale, alias Angelica, claimed a woman was fatally shot in the head, saying the killer was hired by the children's father and mistakenly targeted the wrong person. Police were interested in her detailed knowledge of the case. They discovered her true identity, found social media photos of her with a 9mm pistol, and videos featuring her boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. A video posted by Alexis on the night of the murder helped investigators pinpoint her location, about 10 minutes from Kevin Lewis's house. Jadon boasted about a large sum of money on social media, leading police to discover his connection to Kevin through his aunt. With this evidence, they made an arrest. The first person to be taken into custody was Alexis Hale, who protested loudly, claiming she was only 17 and couldn't be arrested. However, she knew why she was being arrested and demanded a lawyer. Police arrested Jadon Phelps, analyzing his and Hale's phone records, showing they drove from Spokane to Everett to commit the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors revealed someone in a white top leaving and returning around the time of the crime. Lewis was wearing a white top when questioned. Phelps, in custody, revealed Kevin Lewis hired him and Hale and led police through the crime scene, pointing out the door and corner. He stood where he was positioned during the crime, reenacting the events, and admitted to shooting at the door when it opened slightly, then firing 2 more shots before fleeing. Kevin Lewis was already in jail for a crime when he was arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with the September 2017 death of Alicia. In July 2020, 20-year-old Phelps pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. His co-defendant, 18-year-old Hale, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. During the trial, Phelps testified that he committed the crime for financial gain and to increase his reputation on the streets. He used the money Lewis paid him to get tattoos, purchase a pair of Timberland boots, and buy a Ferragamo belt buckle. Phelps claimed that his former girlfriend had obtained the gun used in the crime from a family member, and he had given her $200. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced trial. Prosecutors alleged he paid $2,400 to his cousin and girlfriend to kill his ex-wife, but they mistakenly targeted Alicia. Lewis directed them to the address, claiming he didn't know the target. Phelps and Hale exited their vehicle, with Phelps stopping near the garage and Hale knocking on the door. As Alicia opened it, Phelps fired multiple shots, eventually walking up to the porch, and they fled. They returned, fearing they left a glove, but saw police and drove away. Finally, Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Whitaker was born on August 16, 1969, to a family of 5 children. She was very close to her family, especially her mother, Laura Andrews. However, when Michelle was a teenager, her family moved from Illinois to Gastonia, North Carolina. This move marked the beginning of frequent conflicts between Michelle and her mother because Michelle felt was her mother too strict. After graduating from high school, Michelle got married, but the marriage was short-lived, lasting less than a year. Her husband's abusive behavior was the start of a long and difficult period in Michelle's life. Michelle's life began to unravel after her divorce. Her family moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and by the time she was 30, she was struggling with alcohol addiction and had been through 3 failed marriages. She was working part-time as a waitress and barely making ends meet. One evening in 1999, Michelle met a man named David after work, and he offered to drive her home. However, instead of taking her home, David took Michelle to a secluded location and assaulted her, forcing her to engage in intimate acts. He was arrested a year later, pleaded guilty to assault and battery, and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Before her disappearance, Michelle was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Her parents, desperate to help her, contacted the police and asked that she be held in custody until a spot in a rehabilitation center became available. However, Michelle was mistakenly released from jail without receiving the court-ordered treatment for her substance abuse. This incident caused a significant rift in her relationship with her parents, who had been trying to help her. On August 5, 2002, Michelle got into an argument with her mother and left the house in a bad mood. 3 days later, the man Michelle was staying with contacted her mother, Laura Andrews, and told her that he couldn't find Michelle after they had an argument. This was how Laura first learned that her daughter was missing. Laura immediately reached out to a friend who worked at the local police station for help in finding Michelle. However, the police were familiar with Michelle's lifestyle and advised Laura to wait a little longer, suggesting that Michelle would likely return on her own. Despite this, Michelle failed to return home over the next 2 weeks. As a result, on August 21, 2002, Laura filed an official missing persons report, and local law enforcement began investigating Michelle Whitaker's disappearance. The investigation led to a local truck stop, where Michelle was last seen. The information came from a local resident, Doug, who had met Michelle by chance on the street the day before she disappeared. Doug was out on his motorcycle in the evening when he stopped outside a bar where Michelle was sitting. They struck up a conversation, during which Michelle mentioned that she had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend and he had kicked her out of the house. Doug and Michelle spent the rest of the evening together, visiting another bar where they played billiards, and then took a ride on his motorcycle. Eventually, they went to Doug's house as the sun began to rise. As a result, Doug became the prime suspect in Michelle's disappearance, as he was the last person to have seen her alive. Doug claimed that Michelle had planned to travel to Myrtle Beach, a resort city in South Carolina, where she hoped to find well-paying work in local bars and restaurants. He alleged that he dropped her off at a truck stop and gave her some of his clothes, as well as money to buy coffee and newspapers. After wishing her good luck, he left her there. The police investigated Doug's story by administering a lie detector test, which he passed. They also tested the man Michelle had been staying with before she disappeared, but found no evidence that he was involved in her disappearance. The police started considering the possibility that Michelle might have gone to Myrtle Beach, which is about 250 miles from Spartanburg. As more weeks went by without hearing from Michelle, her family and friends became increasingly anxious. Michelle's lengthy disappearance raised suspicions with the local sheriff, who noted that people usually bring personal belongings when traveling for an extended period. But Michelle had left and Carrie with nothing, and her adored dog was left behind, leading detectives to believe she wouldn't willingly abandon her pet. As her parents scoured the neighborhood for any sign of her, they received tips that Michelle had been spotted on a beach in North Carolina. They quickly drove there and spent 3 days actively searching, distributing flyers, and speaking with locals. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded nothing. After 6 months of fruitless searching, Laura Andrews couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for her daughter. Laura cannot forgive herself for the hurtful words she said to Michelle after the attack. She unfairly blamed Michelle for choosing a path that put her in danger. The sheriff's office initially believed Michelle had motives to escape due to her reputation, and detectives assumed she would eventually be caught. However, a year went by with no results from the search. What concerned the police was that Michelle left no digital trail, which raised suspicions that she might have been a victim of a crime. Perhaps someone, like a truck driver, had taken advantage of her vulnerability. Despite this theory, there was no evidence to support it. 2 years later, the police still haven't received any new clues. However, on the 3rd year's anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, police along with Laura Andrews revisited the truck stop where Michelle was last seen. Local TV stations republished the story, and just days after Michelle's case was reported, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office received a mysterious letter. A handwritten letter, signed anonymously, was sent to investigators claiming to know the location of Michelle Whitaker's body. The letter included a homemade map pinpointing the exact spot. As a result, the sheriff promptly investigated further by sending search dogs to a rural area located 25 miles from where Michelle was last spotted. Unfortunately, the search dogs were unable to detect any scent, and the search was eventually called off. While some had resigned themselves to the possibility that Michelle was no longer alive, others continued to hold out hope that she was still safe. The investigators were also left with unanswered questions, as a handwriting analysis and DNA sample from the envelope suggested that the letter was written by a woman, but did not identify the author. New headlines emerged in the newspapers, shocking Michelle's family, since the Dana Satterfield case was one of the most prominent in Spartanburg County at the time. On July 31, 1995, 27-year-old Dana Satterfield, who owned a beauty salon on Highway 221 in Roebuck, South Carolina, was brutally attacked and killed just before closing time. 7 years later, in August 2002, Michelle Whitaker disappeared. A month and a half later, on September 24, 2002, 20-year-old Heather Sellers vanished without a trace. The last person seen with Heather was her ex-fiancé, Jonathan Vick. Vick was the main suspect in the disappearance of his ex-fiancée, Heather Sellers, but the police couldn't find enough evidence to charge him and the case remains unsolved. One thing to note in common is that Heather and Michelle Whitaker, who vanished about 50 days apart, had two things in common. They both worked at Waffle House and knew each other, and they had both been seen with Jonathan Vick. When Vick was arrested in 2005, Michelle's family members were shocked and suspected that Michelle might have been one of his victims. The police questioned Vick about Heather Sellers and Michelle Whitaker, but he denied any involvement in their disappearances. Without sufficient evidence, the investigations into their cases came to a halt. In 2008, Detective William Gary took over the case of Michelle Whitaker's disappearance, which had gone cold after years without any evidence of her being alive. Just before the 6th anniversary of her disappearance on August 4, 2008, Detective Gary received a call from a woman claiming to know Michelle's whereabouts. She said Michelle was living in Oregon and reported seeing her file on an episode of Forensic Files and a website created by Laura. The woman claimed to have recognized Michelle as a person who had been living with her friends. After years of searching, the investigators were skeptical but eager for proof, so Detective Gary asked the woman to send him a photo of Michelle. Detective Wood, who had previously handled the case, immediately recognized Michelle in the picture when Gary showed it to him. An Oregon State police officer was quickly sent to her location to confirm her identity. The police officer arrived on August 5, 2008, exactly 6 years after Michelle had argued with her mother and left home. The police then contacted Michelle's mother, Laura Andrews, with the news that her daughter had been found alive. Laura was shocked and confused by the sudden revelation. Although the news was deserved for celebration, the police couldn't simply arrange a family reunion. They had to respect Michelle's privacy and couldn't reveal her location to her parents. Instead, the detectives tried to persuade Michelle to contact her family herself. The next evening, Michelle finally called her mother. 2 weeks later, Michelle and her family were reunited at the Atlanta airport, marking the first time they had seen each other in a very long time. Michelle was exhausted with her old life after a fight with her mom, so she decided to leave and start anew, believing her family would be better off without her. Initially, she planned to go to Myrtle Beach to find work, but a series of hitched rides took her to Las Vegas, then California, and finally Oregon. 6 years later, Michelle reached out to her family and the police to apologize for the worry and resources they had expended searching for her, having lived under her real name and assuming no one was looking for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia, to a loving family that included her parents and older brother Tyson. Those who knew her describe her as a free-spirited adventurer with a deep love for nature. She enjoyed hiking, motorcycling, and was a compassionate animal lover. Shanae had a unique gift for forming profound connections with others, often going out of her way to show kindness and generosity to those she met. Her selfless nature was evident in the many ways she helped others, from sharing leftovers with the homeless in Melbourne to teaching orphan children in Colombia and English to Cambodian children. She also tutored a Japanese student and, more recently, cared for a pregnant stray cat that had made her home on her terrace in Georgia. Shanae had always been drawn to Georgia, captivated by its natural beauty, rich history, and cultural landmarks. In 2019, she decided to visit the country, and her boyfriend, Modi El Sayed, a Lebanese national whom she had met during her travels, was also planning to join her. However, El Sayed's travel plans were thwarted due to enter problem. Shanae, meanwhile, was able to enter the country and was thrilled to discover that Georgia lived up to her high expectations. She was enchanted by the country's warm hospitality, breathtaking natural scenery, ancient temples, and delectable cuisine, and ended up staying for almost 2 years before her next adventure took an unexpected turn. Shanae lived in Tbilisi, the capital city of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This job allowed her to earn a living and have enough free time to explore the country and visit new places. During her adventures, she met like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, she posted a photo on social media with a one-word caption, "Joy." The photo showed her enjoying a scenic motorcycle ride, a hobby she loved. The next day, July 30, 2021, was sunny, so Shanae decided to hike up Datsminda, a popular destination among tourists and locals. The mountain is home to the Temple of St. David, nestled among the evergreen vegetation on its slope. Shanae was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavares, which is located at the foot of Mount Datsminda and serves as a starting point for hikers. Shanae was supposed to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city that evening, but she never arrived. When they couldn't reach her by phone, they reported her missing to the police. Around the same time, a friend living in California, who knew Shanae, grew concerned and called Shanae at 4:32 p.m. When Shanae answered, her friend heard her terrified screams, "Please let me go, okay, just let me go." It was clear Shanae was being attacked and pleading to be released. The call abruptly ended, and when Shanae's friend tried calling back, there was no answer. The California friend then reached out to a Facebook group for international individuals living in Georgia, asking someone to contact the police about the alarming call. Shanae's friend reportedly contacted the Georgian police, informing them about the distressing phone call Shanae had made. Regardless of who initiated the contact, it is clear that the Georgian police were quickly alerted and began verifying the information. A massive search operation was launched, involving several hundred police officers and volunteers. The search area was vast, and multiple groups scoured the slopes of Mount Tatsminda. The police employed search dogs and drones to aid in the search, but unfortunately, Shanae was not found. As the sun began to set, concerns grew, as Shanae had not returned home, her phone was off, and she had not sought help at any local hospitals. Tragically, the next day, July 31st, the search efforts ended in the discovery of 31-year-old Shanae Brooke Edwards' body near a hiking trail. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the crime by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was found nearby. Further investigation at the crime scene revealed an old rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. During the autopsy, it was discovered that Shanae had 13 stab wounds, with 5 of them located in the neck area. This led police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill her. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on her neck. After Shanae's death was confirmed, some media outlets reported that the crime was motivated by lust. However, the Georgian police denied this claim, as the forensic medical examiner found no evidence of a crime against her personal integrity. Modi El Sayed, Shanae's boyfriend, is consumed by a desire for revenge against her killer. He has made it his mission to track down the culprit, no matter the cost or time it takes. "My sole focus is on revenge," he stated. "I'm willing to risk spending the rest of my life in prison if it means justice is served and the perpetrator suffers as much as Shanae did." This case significant impact on Georgia's tourism industry. With over $1 billion in annual revenue at stake, the fact that a tourist was killed in the state capital could have serious repercussions for the industry as a whole. The police conducted a thorough investigation, gathering information from over 200 individuals, including friends, colleagues, neighbors, and employees from Matanzama Park, as well as visitors. Investigators also reviewed security footage and analyzed plant life found near the crime scene. A woman from the area shared on an expat Facebook group that she heard a woman scream about an hour after Shanae's departure, while another local resident claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain just one day prior to Shanae's disappearance. She described seeing a man forcibly attacking a woman in a nearby area where the crime ultimately took place. Additionally, forensic experts examined the crime weapon and found male DNA evidence on it. Despite checking the Georgian police database, no match was found. The samples were subsequently sent to all 194 Interpol member states to check for potential matches in their national databases. Witness interviews revealed that Shanae had no known enemies, disputes, or associations with questionable individuals. This led investigators to consider the possibility that she was a random victim of a crime with an unknown motive. The police conducted a thorough investigation, collecting and analyzing DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects. After an exhaustive and meticulous process, they were able to narrow down the list of potential perpetrators and ultimately identified a DNA match. 40 days after the death of Shanae Brooke Edwards, Georgia police issued the following statement based on the evidence obtained during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance tapes, genetic tests, and other evidence. A man born in 1988 was arrested on September 8 this year as the defendant in accordance with the decision of the court. The detainee was Georgian citizen Rafael Mirsakulov. His lawyer told reporters that Mirsakulov denies all the charges against him, namely robbery and taking the life of Shanae Brooke Edwards. He pleads not guilty. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court refused to release Mursakulov on bail while he was awaiting trial in custody. Police officers, in addition to the irrefutable physical evidence they had obtained, also had a no less important testimony. It was a count that after the attack on Shanae Brooke Edwards, Mursakulov returned home and told his brother and his wife about the crime, but warned them that if they told anyone about it, their young child would suffer the same fate as Shanae. In October 2021, the Edwards family published a letter describing what Shanae was like and thanking everyone for their support. In particular, they thanked Georgia for their financial assistance in repatriating Shanae's body and the Georgian people for their continued attention, love, and support during this difficult and tragic time. The first hearing on the case took place in February 2022. Under Georgian law, Mursakulov faced 16 to 20 years in prison. He chose not to exercise his right to remain silent and pleaded guilty at the trial to robbery but denied the charge that he acted intentionally when he took Shanae's life. However, the prosecutor didn't think so. In his opinion, the number of stab wounds spoke to the defendant's intent to take the victim's life. He stabbed Shanae Brooke 13 times, including 5 in the neck, indicating intent to take her life. Moreover, after his knife broke, the defendant strangled the victim, the prosecutor said. The defense argued that Mursakulov was guilty of robbery, and his motive was to steal Shanae Brooke Edwards' iPhone 12. Mursakulov admitted his guilt and apologized to the victim's family, expressing remorse for his actions. According to his lawyer, Mursakulov has mental health issues and committed the crime in an abnormal state. Despite this, the court's psychiatric examination deemed Mursakulov sane, allowing for a real punishment to be imposed. The prosecutor pointed out that traces of strong drugs were found in Mursakulov's blood after his arrest, but this did not excuse his guilt. In a tearful statement, Mursakulov took full responsibility for his actions, apologizing to the Edwards family in the country and vowing not to appeal his sentence. The incident ended in tragedy, with Shanae losing her life and Mursakulov facing punishment for his crime. The sentencing of Rafael Mursakulov was delayed at the request of the prosecution to allow the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, to attend. The Edwards family released a statement pleading with the Georgian justice system to impose a life sentence on Mursakulov. During the March 9, 2022, trial, Mursakulov was found guilty. Tyson Edwards, on behalf of the family, once again requested a life sentence for the defendant. Mursakulov, 33, received the maximum sentence allowed under Georgian law, 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shannon Monty. Shannon Monty was born on April 6, 1997. When she was a young child, her parents immigrated to the United States and settled in Waukesha, Wisconsin, where she grew up and attended school. Her parents thought Waukesha was an ideal place to raise their children because of its friendly atmosphere and good schools. Shannon was a bright, attractive, and outgoing person who made friends easily. After graduating from high school in 2015, Shannon enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She was interested in social work and wanted to help people in need. Despite her busy schedule, she worked part-time at an organic food company with her father. It was there that she met Quentin Neal, a 26-year-old man who shared her passion for helping others. They bonded quickly over their similar values and interests. Shannon had always dreamed of building a shelter for women and children, and Quentin was equally committed to making a positive impact. As their friendship blossomed into romance, they decided to live together. Shannon was thrilled to have found someone like Quentin, who cared deeply for her and made their relationship a happy and fulfilling one. Shannon's parents were making plans with her for their future together until her sudden disappearance. On April 13, 2018, Shannon failed to pick up her younger brother from school and didn't show up for work, which was unusual for her. Her phone was found to be turned off, and she had not informed anyone that she would be missing her shift. Her parents went to the police station the same day, unable to locate their daughter on their own. Initially, detectives thought that Shannon, being young, might have simply run away with friends or taken a spontaneous trip. However, her parents quickly dismissed this idea, as it was out of character for Shannon to cut off contact and ignore her family's worry. Shannon's mother provided crucial details to the investigators, which led them to take the case more seriously and pursue it further. Shannon's room still contained some of her money, documents, and valuables, which was a concerning factor in her disappearance. When questioned, Shannon's parents revealed that her boyfriend was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. When investigators contacted Quentin by phone, he claimed to have no knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts. Shannon had been living with her parents, and Quentin said he hadn't seen Shannon that day. The investigators asked Quentin to come to the police station for questioning. Quentin appeared anxious and agreed to come immediately. When he arrived, Shannon's parents were still present. Quentin told the investigators that the last time he saw Shannon was over 24 hours ago, when she left his house to pick up her little brother from school. The investigators asked Quentin if he knew where Shannon might be, but he didn't have any idea. However, he did remember that another man had been interested in Shannon, despite knowing she was in a relationship and pregnant. According to Quentin, this man continued to pursue Shannon even after she told him to leave her alone. The next day, the police began interviewing Shannon's friends to gather more information. They also distributed details about the search for Shannon to all police stations in Wisconsin. Later that day, they found a disturbing discovery that Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, about 20 minutes from her home. Forensic investigators thoroughly examined the car but found no signs of a crime, such as a carjacking or struggle. Shannon's purse and phone were missing, but they did find fingerprints from 3 people: Shannon, Quentin, and an unknown individual. The man mentioned by Quentin was brought in for questioning. He claimed to be distraught over Shannon's disappearance, but denied Quentin's allegations, saying they were merely friends and never pursued a romantic relationship. However, a significant break in the case came when Angshaman, Shannon's mother, found Shannon's Apple Watch and reviewed Shannon's text messages. She took the watch to the police station, allowing investigators to examine it further. The investigators discovered that Quentin and Shannon had arranged to meet on the day she went missing, contradicting Quentin's earlier statement. The text messages also revealed that Quentin had been abusive towards Shannon, although she was pregnant with his child. Quentin had apologized for his behavior and begged her not to leave him. The investigators suspected Quentin was not a good person due to his criminal history, including a prison sentence for robbery and multiple arrests for assault and minor offenses. Shannon's parents had become increasingly suspicious of him as they noticed their daughter was often depressed. Quentin's emotional instability regarding the baby Shannon was expecting only added to their concerns. After Shannon told her parents about the pregnancy, they met with Quentin, who promised to care for both Shannon and the baby. However, Shannon's mother later discovered severe bruising on her daughter's arms and learned that Quentin was responsible for the injuries. When Shannon's cell phone was last detected near Quentin's residence on April 13th, the investigators became worried they might not find her alive. They quickly obtained a search warrant and searched Quentin's house, but initially found no signs of a crime scene or struggle, as the place was clean and appeared normal. Forensics investigators used luminol on the first floor, but it revealed no evidence. However, when they applied it to the basement, they found numerous traces, strongly suggesting that Shannon was likely deceased. Quentin Neal was subsequently arrested and taken into custody. Before questioning him, investigators analyzed his phone records, discovering that he had recently searched online for ways to remove evidence of a crime using a certain chemical. He was apparently trying to conceal his involvement. During the interrogation, Quentin repeatedly denied any knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts and claimed to have no connection to her disappearance. The investigators finally had concrete evidence, which led Quentin to change his story. He eventually agreed to confess to the crime, but he claimed he acted in self-defense when he took Shannon's life. Quentin explained that Shannon had visited his house to discuss their future and their child. However, the conversation turned into an argument, and Shannon went into the kitchen. She picked up a knife and gun stored there for emergencies. According to Quentin, Shannon then threatened him, prompting him to act quickly. The two got into a physical altercation, which ultimately ended in Shannon's death. Quentin stressed to the investigators that he had only defended himself. Although they were skeptical due to Quentin's lack of defensive wounds, they continued to listen to his account. Quentin Neal panicked when he realized he had done something irreversible. He hid evidence of the crime in a large suitcase in the basement of his house, where the incident occurred. Later, he led the police to a storage unit 6 miles from his residence, where the suitcase was stored. Inside, detectives found the body of Shannon, Quentin's girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time. Shannon's wrists and ankles were bound with duct tape, contradicting Quentin's claim of self-defense. Forensic experts determined that Shannon died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had additional knife wounds on her body. On April 18, 2018, detectives informed Shannon's parents of the devastating discovery. Quentin was subsequently indicted for the murder of Shannon and her unborn child. The evidence gathered, including their correspondence on the day of the incident, was sufficient to secure a guilty verdict. According to the evidence, Shannon had visited Quentin's house to discuss her pregnancy, but an argument ensued, and she never left the house alive. The trial of Quentin Neal was initially set to begin in the spring of 2019, but it was delayed by 3 months due to anonymous letters received by attorneys and court officials just days before the start date. These letters claimed that someone other than Quentin Neal was responsible for Shannon's death. However, when the author of the letters was identified as one of Quentin's friends, who had written them in an attempt to confuse the investigation and help Quentin, the judge ruled that the letters were not relevant. Quentin Neal was facing the possibility of capital punishment and denied the charges against him, claiming he had acted in self-defense. 15 months had passed since Shannon's death, and her family was eager for justice. Before her death, Shannon had been working to support victims of domestic violence and help women and children. Her family had planned to build a shelter home, a dream that was put on hold when Shannon became a victim herself. On July 15, 2019, Quentin Neal accepted a plea deal with investigators, admitting his guilt in the murder of Shannon and her child. As part of the agreement, prosecutors dropped their pursuit of the death penalty. 2 days later, on July 17, 2019, Neal was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences by the Milwaukee County Circuit Court. He will not be eligible for parole, ensuring he will spend the remainder of his life in prison. During his sentencing, Neal remained silent, never explaining his motivations for the crime. Shannon's family expressed relief that justice had been served. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson was 23 years old in 2012, and her life was a challenge. She had recently separated from her husband, Wayne, and they were in the process of getting a divorce. They had 2 young children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr. Despite the difficulties they faced as parents, Heather was determined to provide a happy life for her kids. She had found a new home on a quiet street near Lake Erie, which brought her some sense of relief. Heather and Wayne had been high school sweethearts, but their marriage had fallen apart. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle Sorrell arrived at her house at 2:30 p.m. for a prearranged meeting. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked, leaving her wondering what was going on. Danielle was puzzled that Heather and her kids weren't at home despite their planned meeting. Even if Heather had changed her plans, she would have alerted Danielle. So, Danielle called Heather's mom, Jody, who was very close to her daughter and spoke with her daily. However, Jody couldn't reach Heather that day either. Danielle then contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Her concern grew when she spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch. Danielle knew Heather would never leave the house without the pacifier, so something was off. Hours passed, but Heather still hadn't contacted her mom. Jody's unease called the police to request a check. The officers arrived, knocked on the door, and got no response. They circled the house, peeking through the windows, but saw nothing suspicious. Since they found no signs of forced entry or foul play, they couldn't enter the house without a warrant and left. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Heather's friends, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, arrived at her house after discovering she was missing. When no one answered the front door, Reiner proceeded to the back porch, forced the door open, and entered the home. Inside, they found Heather's naked body in the bedroom and immediately called 911. Sergeant Eric Graybill, a Sandusky police officer, responded to the scene and entered the house. He discovered Heather's body lodged between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature around her neck. The TV was still on, but the children were nowhere to be found. Their room was empty. During their search of the house, the officers noticed a utility closet door that they had not yet checked. When Sergeant Bill opened the door, he found stacked boxes with objects behind them. Behind the boxes, he discovered the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately secured the crime scene. The officers were deeply shaken by the discovery, having never encountered a crime of such magnitude before. Heather's family and friends were even more devastated after the forensic examination results were revealed. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed the autopsies on the 3 victims. Her findings showed that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation. Additionally, Dr. Barnett observed that Heather's rectum was unusually open after death, suggesting that an object was likely inserted into the area around the time of her death, causing it to remain in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett testified that both Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson also died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear was rolled up, indicating that the body had been redressed. Selena also had a rectal dilation similar to her mother's, again indicating that something was in her rectum at or about the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, testified that there was seminal fluid on the anal swabs obtained from Selena Jackson. Cox also noticed a stain in Selena Jackson's underwear, so she cut a small portion of that stained area for testing and determined that it contained a sperm cell. The police were determined to quickly catch the monster responsible for the crime. Since Heather's house was located next to Firelands Regional Medical Center, investigators obtained footage from the building's surveillance cameras, which they hoped would lead them to the perpetrator. Reviewing the CCTV footage, they identified a car that drove up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. Although the camera was far from the house and the darkness made it difficult to see, the car's headlights provided some clues about what happened. The footage showed the car backing into the driveway and remaining there for 11 minutes. At 11:08 p.m., the headlights turned on again, and the driver departed. Meanwhile, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the men who discovered Heather's body, were brought to the police station for questioning. The investigators questioned them separately, starting with Dan Reiner, who had called 911. Dan and Heather were friends, and when Dan discovered she was missing, he went to her house to look for her. He had to push the door hard to get in. After calling 911, the police asked Dan for a DNA sample, which he willingly provided. The results are nothing special, and he was released. The police then questioned Thomas Hansen, who claimed to have spoken with Heather on the phone the previous night. He said he drove to her house around 11 p.m. but didn't go inside. Instead, they chatted briefly outside, and then he left. This revelation helped the police identify the driver of the car seen on CCTV footage, Thomas Hansen. Hansen also revealed that he didn't enter Heather's house because she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone Hansen knew as Josh. Hansen's account matched Reiner's, stating that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to investigate. After releasing the initial suspect, the police shifted their focus to a new suspect, Josh Case, who was at Heather's house on the night of her death. They quickly located him and brought him in for questioning. Josh admitted to knowing Heather for years and being at her house that evening, where they watched TV while the children slept. He also claimed to have gone to the store to buy breakfast for the kids, returning to the house before a friend picked him up at around 1 a.m. Josh acknowledged having consensual intimate contact with Heather. Investigators verified his alibi by reviewing the store's CCTV footage, which confirmed he entered the store at 11:20 p.m. While this corroboration supported his testimony, it did not rule out the possibility that Josh might still be involved in Heather's tragic death. Heather's last known contact was with Josh Case, making him the prime suspect. He provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the DNA found on the victims' bodies. The results eliminated Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner as suspects, as their DNA did not match. However, Josh's DNA matched the DNA on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies, indicating another person was present that night. This was not surprising, as Josh had previously admitted to an intimate relationship with Heather. The police now focused on finding the DNA of the second person involved. They quickly ruled out Heather's husband, Wayne, who was going through a divorce with Heather and lived in another state. The investigators turned to Heather's cell phone records for answers. The records showed Heather was active on her phone, including on the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police's next step was to identify the owner of the phone number Heather last spoke to. 36 hours after Heather's death, police obtained another CCTV footage that showed a white car arriving at her house around 3 a.m. This timing coincided with when Heather stopped using her phone, suggesting a possible connection. The car left about an hour later, by which time Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage was not clear enough to reveal the license plate, investigators identified the car as a Cadillac. Further investigation led police to the owner of the phone number Heather had called before her death. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton, who had a 30-second conversation with Heather at 3:12 a.m. A background check on Clinton revealed a disturbing history. He had been released from prison in February after serving 13 years for 2 counts of felonious assault and manslaughter. Clinton had pleaded guilty to the 1997 death of 18-year-old Misty Keckler, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarities between Keckler's death and Heather's raised concerns among investigators, especially given that Clinton had been released from prison just 6 months before Heather and her children's deaths. This raised the possibility that Clinton had returned to his violent ways after his release. Curtis Clinton became the prime suspect in the murder of Heather and her children, and the police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. The police visited Clinton's last known address but were unable to find him. However, they soon discovered a white Cadillac parked on a nearby street. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station dated the night of the crime. The investigators reviewed the gas station's CCTV footage, which showed Clinton purchasing water and beer while appearing calm. This was after the time Heather and her children were killed. The police were received information that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They immediately went to the hospital, found Clinton, and arrested him, taking him into custody at the police station. Clinton denied any involvement in the deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. He admitted to having dated Heather for 5 months and having an intimate relationship with her. According to Clinton, Heather had many personal problems and had asked him for financial and emotional support. He claimed that he didn't know her children well. Clinton initially stated that he last saw Heather on Thursday, September 6th, when he gave her $328 and they had intimate contact. However, when the investigator showed him phone records indicating that he had spoken with Heather at 3:12 a.m. on September 8th, Clinton corrected himself, saying that it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw her. Clinton claimed that he didn't stay long at Heather's house, dropping off the money and then leaving after their intimate encounter. He couldn't recall what time he arrived home. Clinton suggested that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left, as Heather had mentioned receiving an irritating call or text while he was with her. When confronted with the fact that he was the last person to have contact with Heather, Clinton expressed doubt. Curtis Clinton was arrested and jailed after his DNA was found on the victims. In a recorded call to his mother, Clinton expressed regret and confusion, saying he wished he'd sought help. He also hinted at a violent temper, suggesting it could happen again. His mother acknowledged the family's struggles, but said they'd learned to manage them, and noted that Clinton had stopped taking his medication, which contributed to his behavior. Clinton told his mother that he planned to plead guilty to the charges and accept whatever consequences came his way. The investigation led to multiple charges against Clinton. Furthermore, it was discovered that just 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children, Clinton had attacked a 17-year-old girl, choking her and forcing her to engage in intimate contact. The victim had gone to the hospital, where police collected DNA evidence that also linked Clinton to the crime. Clinton asked to move the trial to a different location, claiming that the local media had already publicized the case so much that it would be hard to find impartial jurors. However, the court denied this request. Clinton brutally murdered Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and the forensic evidence, including his DNA found inside Selena's body, revealed the horrific details of his crimes. Despite facing the death penalty, Clinton did everything he could to avoid it. When given the opportunity to speak before being sentenced, he did not show remorse or apologize to the victims' families. Instead, he attacked prosecutor Kevin Baxter and vowed to win on appeal and have his case retried. In November 2013, Clinton was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for what he did to 3-year-old Selena before strangling her, and added another 10 years for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before killing Heather and her children. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jolene Cummings. Jolene Cummings, a 34-year-old mother of 3, lived in Fernandina Beach and was going through a divorce from her husband, Jason. As part of their arrangement, Jason would pick up the children on weekends from their home in Fernandina Beach, where Jolene lived with them. Jolene worked as a hairdresser at Tangle's Hair Salon. On Saturday, May 12, 2018, she worked until 5 p.m. The next day was Mother's Day and also her 34th birthday. According to their plan, Jolene was supposed to meet Jason in the parking lot of the Winn-Dixie supermarket in Hilliard on Sunday to pick up the children. However, Jolene failed to show up, and Jason was unable to reach her by phone. Jolene's mother, and Johnson, also tried to contact her to wish her a happy birthday, but all her calls went straight to voicemail. Jason eventually called and to ask if she knew why Jolene hadn't arrived to pick up the children. Jolene failed to pick up her children, which was unusual behavior for her. Concerned, and reported Jolene missing to the police on Monday, May 14th, after being unable to contact Jolene. The police immediately launched an investigation and issued a missing person poster with Jolene's photo. They also put out an alert for her 2006 Ford Expedition. On the same day, police and volunteers searched the forest area near Jolene's home but found nothing. The police learned that Jolene was last seen leaving work at the Tangles Salon on Saturday, May 12. The salon's owner reported that Jolene and her coworker, Jennifer, had closed the salon together at 5 p.m. that day. According to Jennifer, they had each gotten into their own cars and driven away separately after work. The police discovered that Jolene's last phone activity was an outgoing call made while she was still at work on May 12. The police were determined to find a lead and began scrutinizing Jolene's personal life. They focused on her ex-boyfriend Jason, as spouses often turn against each other during divorce and custody battles. Meanwhile, detectives uncovered that 5 days before Jolene vanished, a neighbor reported a loud argument at Jolene's residence. The dispute was between Jolene and Jason, with their children present. Jason had asked Jolene to let him stay with her temporarily, but she refused, knowing the police were searching for him for violating his parole. In a fit of rage, Jason began destroying property. By the time the police arrived, Jason had seemingly escaped, but the truth was unclear. After Jolene disappeared, the police began to focus on Jason as a person of interest in her disappearance. On the second day of the investigation, May 15, 2018, several significant events unfolded. The police discovered Jason hiding in Jolene's house, where he had been since the day Jolene's neighbor reported a loud argument to the authorities. He was subsequently arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, Jason claimed to have no involvement in Jolene's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police found a crucial lead. Jolene's SUV was discovered parked outside a Home Depot hardware store, just a few miles from her workplace. The vehicle showed no signs of damage or struggle. After a 2-day break, Jolene's salon reopened on May 15. At 10 a.m., the police visited the salon to speak with Jennifer Sibbert, the last person to see Jolene before the weekend. However, Jennifer didn't show up for work, claiming she had an urgent matter to attend to in another city. Thanks to CCTV footage, investigators made a breakthrough in Jolene's disappearance. The footage revealed Jolene's car entering the parking lot of a hardware store, where it was later found by the police. Notably, Jennifer had claimed that she and Jolene closed the salon together at 5 p.m. on May 12, but the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car arriving at the hardware store at 1:17 a.m. on May 13, a gap of 8 hours and 17 minutes. At a press conference, Sheriff Bill Leepert explained that the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car parking at 1:17 a.m. on Sunday. The video showed the driver waiting for a few minutes before getting out. But instead of seeing Jolene exit the car, the footage surprisingly showed Jennifer Sibbert, the same hairdresser who claimed to be the last person to see Jolene. After leaving Jolene's car, Jennifer went to the gas station across the street. The gas station footage shows Jennifer entering the store, where she purchased a bottle of water and requested that an employee call her a taxi. The taxi was later confirmed to have taken her to her workplace, a salon. According to the gas station employee, Jennifer appeared to be annoyed and had visible, fresh abrasions on her face. As a result, Jennifer Sibbert became the primary suspect in the investigation, and the police began searching for her. However, the address she had provided on her job application was found to be fake. Despite her attempts to hide, Jennifer was eventually found. On May 16th, police officers spotted her black Kia Soul parked between two trucks in a recreation area, just 50 meters from the salon. Upon approaching the vehicle, the officers discovered Jennifer sleeping inside. Jennifer Sibbert was arrested and initially charged with stealing a car belonging to Jolene Cummings. When police brought her in for questioning, they noticed abrasions on her hands and face and asked her to explain them. She claimed she had been bitten by bed bugs. Further investigation revealed that she was homeless, often sleeping in her car and using a local fitness center shower. As investigators dug deeper, they made a surprising discovery that Jennifer Sibbert was not her real name. In fact, she was actually Kimberly Kessler, born in 1968 and reported missing in Pennsylvania in 2012. It turned out that she had been using the identity of Jennifer Marie Sibbert, a 13-year-old girl who had died in a car accident in Germany in 1987 and was buried in Pennsylvania. The investigation into Kimberly Kessler's case revealed a trail of deception dating back to 1996, when she began using stolen identities. At that time, she was living in Pennsylvania. Since then, Kessler has assumed at least 18 different identities and lived in 33 cities across 14 states. Many of these aliases bear similar names, which she often obtained by stealing names from gravestones and cemeteries. The police charged Kimberly Kessler with forgery after discovering she had been using fake names. A search of a storage unit she rented uncovered several suspicious items, including 4 wigs, a bag containing 2 cut-off hair tails, and 3 mobile phones. However, the most significant evidence was the discovery of Jolene Cummings's DNA on Kessler's sock and shoe. Additionally, scissors found in Kessler's car also contained Jolene's DNA. A review of Kessler's phone search history revealed that Kessler was preparing for Jolene's disappearance, which was not an accident. 2 weeks before Jolene vanished on May 12, Kessler searched for information on murder cases, including a query about a man who was charged with murder after his co-worker's remains were found in his yard. She also searched for information on co-workers who had been found guilty of murder, even when the victim's body had not been found. Kessler's search history also included queries about how to use a tourniquet, as well as information on female murderers in Florida and autopsy procedures. Furthermore, she searched for information on post-mortem changes, which suggests that she was trying to learn about what happens to the body after death. These search queries are particularly suspicious in light of a discovery made by the owner of the hair salon where Jolene worked. The owner reported that the plant in the salon had been replaced, which may be connected to Kessler's search for information on how to dispose of a body. On May 13, the day Jolene failed to pick up her kids, Kessler conducted internet searches at 12:05 p.m. for indoor palm and then at 12:06 p.m. for variation palm tree. The police analyzed CCTV footage from a nearby home goods store and found that Kessler visited the store on May 14 at 2:39 p.m. and left 30 minutes later with a palm plant, which was later found at the Tangles hair salon. Kessler's online searches continued, with Jolene Cummings I Have Vanished on May 15 at 6:13 p.m. and No Body No Crime on May 16 at 6:27 p.m. Forensic experts used luminol and ultraviolet light to examine the hair salon and discovered evidence of a serious crime, as the room glowed under the testing. On May 22, the sheriff announced during a press conference that they had gathered sufficient evidence to conclude that Jolene Cummings was dead, although some evidence was being withheld to protect the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Jolene had expressed concerns about her coworker Jennifer, the new hairdresser, to another employee at the Tangles salon, stating that Jennifer seemed suspicious and was hiding something. This conversation took place about a week before Jolene's disappearance. Witnesses reported that Jolene and Jennifer had a tense relationship, and one person even saw them arguing on May 9, just 3 days before Jolene vanished. The Tangles hair salon eventually closed on June 5, 2018. The hair salon footage shows of Kessler visiting the dumpster at least 4 times. In the first footage, taken shortly after midnight, Kessler is seen doing something near the dumpster. At 8:08 a.m., she returns to throw away a heavy-looking white garbage bag. 14 minutes later, she disposes of another similar bag. The final footage, taken an hour before midnight, shows Kessler lifting a waste container to empty its contents, suggesting it also holds something heavy. The Walmart security footage revealed what Kessler had thrown away in the dumpster. The video showed her purchasing items at the self-checkout, including garbage bags, cleaning supplies, latex gloves, and an electric knife. This discovery led the police to investigate further. They found that a local waste management company was taking trash to a landfill in Georgia. In July 2018, nearly 200 people searched the landfill for a week, but the sheriff did not disclose what they found, citing the ongoing investigation. Near the dumpster where Kessler disposed of the white garbage bags, the police discovered a piece of jewelry, women's shoes, and a blue plastic container that matched one found in Kessler's storage unit. The container contained Jolene Cummings's DNA. Although Jolene's body was not found, the police had sufficient evidence to arrest Kessler for her murder. Kessler's first court appearance was on January 17, 2019, where she pleaded not guilty. However, the trial was delayed for several years due to concerns about Kessler's sanity. She went on a hunger strike, losing significant weight, and her court appearances often ended in outbursts of anger. In 2021, Kessler underwent mandatory treatment before the court session, and she was eventually deemed competent to stand trial. During a press conference, Sheriff Leeper made a statement saying that they were sending Kessler to Florida State Prison, where she would spend the rest of her life. Sadly, Jolene Cummings's body has never been recovered or found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicholas Billingham. Fiona Beale was a kind and friendly woman who was devoted to her job and adored by her students. She lived with her partner, 42-year-old Nicholas Billingham, in Northampton, a large town in England. Fiona and Nicholas had been together for 17 years and, like many couples, they experienced their share of highs and lows. Leslie, a friend of them, described them as content. Leslie recalled that she had thought Fiona was really nice. Leslie mentioned that they hadn't displayed overt affection but seemed happy. Nicholas's history with women suggested that his relationships were often short-lived. His relationship with Fiona ended abruptly in November 2021, but it wasn't due to the usual reasons. The breakup occurred after they were required to isolate themselves for 10 days. After the breakup, Nicholas maintained contact with his friends and family, revealing to his mother that he had left with a woman named Faye and was happy with his new life. Meanwhile, Fiona completed her 10-day isolation period, recovered, and eventually returned to work. She received supportive messages from her colleagues when she returned to work. However, the split had a lasting impact on her. By the end of February 2022, nearly 4 months after the breakup, her mental health began to decline significantly. The memories of Nicholas in her Northampton home became overwhelming, so she decided to move to Cumbria, a 200-mile distance from her previous home. On March 15, 2022, her family grew concerned after reading her text messages. Their worry prompted them to contact the police. The police found Fiona severely injured in a bath at her Lake District Lodge rental. Officer Josh Parkin testified in court that when he arrived, ominous music was playing from her phone, and he initially thought she was dead. Parkin described the scene, stating that he had found a completely naked female lying in the bath. Music was playing from a mobile phone next to her. He immediately called for an ambulance and suggested they try to get her out of the bath to administer CPR. She then became partially conscious. To check her responsiveness, he had pulled her ear firmly, and she had moaned, trying to turn over. They had sat her up, and she had become emotional. Parkin had discovered a blue leather-bound notebook with a logo on the front. A quick glance had revealed it was a personal document detailing her mental health struggles at the time. Fiona's notebook revealed a dark history of abuse and a sinister plot. She wrote about her husband Nicholas's cruel behavior, including spitting on her and threatening her during intimate contact. She started planning her revenge as Tulip 22, a reckless and ruthless alter ego. Fiona described how she planned and executed the murder, using a knife and an eye mask to carry out the crime. She hid the body in the bathroom and later moved it to the garden, where it was buried under multiple layers of materials. The police initially dismissed Fiona's notebook as ramblings, but upon re-examining it, they found disturbing details that led them to investigate further. They searched Fiona's house and found a blood-stained mattress in the cellar. On March 19th, forensic officers and a cadaver dog discovered Nicholas's remains in the garden, wrapped in carpet and buried under various materials. Fiona's notebook revealed her regret and apology for the crime, but also her anger and hurt towards her husband. The body was found with a sleep mask covering the eyes, bearing the phrase, "This is my morning after" face on the inside. The police spokesman described the scene as showing utter contempt, as the body was wrapped in cables, hose pipes, and plastic bags mixed with debris from a building. An autopsy was conducted the day after the discovery. The results confirmed that the cause of death was a single stab wound to the right side of the neck, damaging the right jugular vein, esophagus, and trachea. The injury was inflicted with moderate force. Following the investigation, police arrested Fiona Beale on March 22, 2022, charging her with the murder of Nicholas Billingham. Nicholas's family was shocked and heartbroken when they learned of his death, particularly after discovering that Fiona had sent texts to them and Nicholas's friends from his own phone. Following the police investigation into Nicholas' death on November 1, 2021, it was discovered that Fiona attempted to cover her tracks in the days that followed. As part of her plan, Fiona claimed to infection, which would have given her a 10-day period of isolation, during which she would not be disturbed. Fiona's actions during this 10-day period were inconsistent with the severe symptoms she claimed to be experiencing due to the infection. On November 2nd, with Fiona using Nicholas's Amazon account, and later her own, to purchase various cleaning supplies, including products for Venetian blinds, a new mop and bucket, heavy-duty trash bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothing, wall art, and mirrors. Later that day, Fiona made changes to her order, adding 3 rolls of duct tape to a delivery that already included multiple cleaning products. She also made a separate purchase at 2:19 p.m., buying heavy-duty gardening gloves, a stainless steel digging spade, and a garden incinerator. These items would later be used to dispose of a body. Nearly 2 weeks after Nicholas's death, Fiona went shopping again. On November 13th, supermarket cameras caught her buying various items, including building materials that she would later use to construct a grave. The police released the CCTV footage of this shopping trip. Fiona also impersonated Nicholas by sending texts to his family and friends for several months. She even invited Nicholas's mother to visit her at home. Nicholas's mother, Miss Valentine, reported that Fiona had invited her over for a Christmas drink on December 23, 2021. Unbeknownst to Miss Valentine, her son's body was buried in Fiona's back garden at the time. Fiona Beale appeared to be living a normal life, showing no signs of depression or trauma after the incident. During the trial, Fiona initially denied any wrongdoing but later admitted to taking Nicholas's life, claiming it was an involuntary act. However, the prosecutor disagreed with her account. He presented evidence that Nicholas had been unfaithful to Fiona throughout their 17-year relationship, cheating on her with multiple women. Despite Nicholas's infidelity, Fiona had taken him back on multiple occasions. The prosecutor revealed that one of Nicholas's affairs had resulted in a child. Instead of leaving Nicholas, Fiona allegedly planned and executed murder, carefully considering how to kill him, dispose of his body, and cover her tracks. She also prepared explanations for his disappearance and her own absence from work on the day of the crime. Defense attorney Andrew Wheeler addressed the jury after the prosecution's opening argument, stating that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years due to Nicholas Billingham's controlling behavior. He emphasized that Fiona, a 49-year-old woman with a good reputation, was a hardworking and well-liked school teacher who had been in a 17-year partnership with the victim. Wheeler asked the jury to consider how someone with Fiona's good character could commit such a crime. Wheeler stressed that the key issue in the case was her state of mind at the time of the killing. Wheeler explained that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years and suggested that Nicholas Billingham's psychologically dominating behavior had gradually worn her down. Fiona Beale admitted her wrongdoing. She then shared details about her personal life and relationship with Nicholas at Northampton Crown Court. Fiona revealed that she had been prescribed antidepressants during her university years. She described Nicholas as caring and attentive at the start of their relationship, but claimed he gradually changed over time. Fiona alleged that Billingham's behavior became increasingly controlling, particularly when it came to cleaning. She recalled an incident where she had left a cloth with cleaner on it, which stained a worktop. Although it seemed minor at first, cleaning became a major issue throughout their relationship. Instead of laughing off mistakes, Fiona said she would get scolded by Billingham. She also described how meal times became rigid and inflexible, with everything having to be exactly as Nicholas wanted it. Over time, this behavior escalated and continued until the end of their relationship. Even small things, like the way items were placed in cupboards, became a point of contention, with Nicholas insisting that they face outwards. Fiona testified that Nicholas's behavior escalated from joking insults to cruel comments, which made her lose confidence. She also shared that before taking Nicholas's life, she warned him that she would kill him if he ever treated another woman the way he treated her. The judge stated that considering the severity of the crime, he sentenced Fiona to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Valerie Tiemann. Valerie Joy Tiemann was born on December 31, 1981, in Salem, Virginia, to parents Sarah Jean Sampson Tiemann and Jean Allen Harmon. She spent her childhood in Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated from Hampton Park Christian School in 2000. Valerie pursued her passion for beauty by earning a degree in cosmetology from Bob Jones University. Valerie was a bright and friendly person, known for her warm smile and outgoing personality. She had a flair for drama and speech, and was also musically inclined, playing the piano and flute. With her cosmetology skills, Valerie worked in various salons, spas, and pageants. In her personal life, Valerie was in a relationship with Matt Gotcha, whom she met through a mutual friend when she was 22 years old. Although they had distinct personalities, Valerie being outgoing and cheerful, while Matt was more reserved, their differences did not create problems in their relationship. Valerie and Matt got married in 2004 and initially lived happily together in Matt's small house. However, over time, Valerie's parents noticed a change in her behavior. Matt became controlling, restricting Valerie's access to their finances and forcing her to open a separate bank account to have some independence. As time went on, Matt's behavior worsened, and he began to blame Valerie for all their problems. Valerie endured years of emotional pain, but eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. After 10 years of marriage, Valerie and Matt divorced in 2014. Valerie found solace with Luke Tiemann, a reliable and loving man who had served in the army for 10 years, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Luke helped Valerie overcome her past traumas, and her relatives noticed a marked improvement in her mood. She began to smile and laugh again, returning to her cheerful self. On June 6, 2014, Luke and Valerie got married, starting a new chapter in their lives together. They settled into Luke's parents' house in Fairfield, Maine, while Valerie's parents lived in South Carolina. Luke and Valerie went back to Maine after visiting her family in South Carolina in August 2016. A week after returning to Maine, Luke started chatting with another woman on Facebook. On August 24, 2016, several people saw Luke with this new woman, and that night, they had intimate relations. It appears Valerie found out about Luke's affair. That same night, Valerie tried calling Luke 31 times within 5 hours. The next day, on August 25, 2016, a mutual friend told Valerie that Luke was pursuing other women and claiming they were separated. Valerie sent several messages to this friend, expressing her heartbreak but trusting that God had a plan and that Luke would never find a better partner than her. On August 26, 2016, he moved in with she he was having an affair with and told her that Valerie had left him for another man. Valerie, who normally called her parents in South Carolina every week, suddenly stopped responding to their calls and text messages for over a week. Her parents reached out to her boyfriend Luke to ask about her well-being. Luke responded a day later, saying that they were fine and that he loved her. However, 13 days passed and Valerie's parents still couldn't get in touch with Valerie, so they decided to call Luke's father for information. He told them that Valerie had been missing for about 2 weeks and asked what he should do with her belongings. Valeria's father spoke with Luke T-Man, asking why he hadn't reported her missing. Luke claimed Valeria left him for another man and would tell her parents herself. However, her parents were skeptical, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of Valeria, and they believed she would have reached out to them. On September 9, 2016, Valeria's father filed a missing persons report with the Fairfield Police Department. Detectives investigated by visiting Luke's parents' home, where Valerie lived. They spoke with Luke's mother, Laurel T. Mann, who claimed no knowledge of their whereabouts. 2 weeks after Valerie's disappearance, Laurel packed up Valerie's belongings in garbage bags, showing apparent indifference to her well-being. The police were searching for Luke T. Mann to ask him some questions about Valerie's disappearance, but they couldn't find him. When they finally spoke to him 5 days later, he claimed that he had last seen Valerie 2 weeks prior at a local Walmart. According to Luke, Valerie had stayed in the car while he went shopping, but when he returned, she was gone. Luke said he tried to contact Valerie by phone and text, but she didn't respond. He assumed she had left him for another man, whom he didn't know by name. Luke claimed their marriage was nearing its end and that Valerie had mentioned someone else during a conversation. However, Valerie's family was unaware of anyone other than Luke in her life, casting doubt on his claims. Police sought public help through the media, sharing a photo of Valerie and asking for sightings. Detectives found the situation suspicious, including discarded belongings and Luke T-Man's lack of effort to find his wife, raising questions about his involvement. To verify Luke's story, investigators reviewed Walmart surveillance footage from the day Valerie vanished. However, after examining the CCTV recordings, they found no evidence of Luke, his truck, or Valerie. This discovery indicated Luke had lied, suggesting he was hiding something. Luke's infidelity with Billy Joe was no secret. He admitted to cheating on Valerie, hoping to move on. Billy Joe claimed to know nothing about Valerie's disappearance, thinking Luke was divorced from her. But a local resident approached the police with a disturbing find that Valerie's driver's license in a parking lot near Billy Joe's home. Suspicion grew due to the proximity of the license to Billy Joe's home. It seemed unlikely Valerie would abandon her belongings and ID if she had run off with someone. 10 days after her father's report, Luke repeated his story to News Center Maine, claiming he didn't find Valerie at Walmart. However, Walmart's CCTV footage contradicted his alibi. On September 20, 2016, detectives obtained a search warrant for Luke's parents' property in Fairfield, where Valerie last lived. Police dogs trained to detect human remains joined the search. Just 5 minutes in, a dog found something suspicious in the woods. Officers dug up a woman's body wrapped in a blanket, along with some unusual items. The investigation found several items near Valerie's body: a bag of potato chips, perfume, sweet tarts, a flannel shirt, and a mason jar with a handwritten note. A wedding ring was discovered later, hidden among the jar's contents of dirt, stems, and twigs. Sergeant Scott Bryant, who found the ring, noted it was larger than his own wedding ring. The handwritten note, which was worn and dirty, stated that it was for his one and only joy, Valerie Flower forever, and that he loved Valerie Joy Tierman. It continued by expressing that she should rest in peace with his heart and Jesus, and that he couldn't wait to see her again. The note was signed Lie Bear, a nickname Luke later explained to the police was used by him in several other notes found in Valerie's purse. These items, including the note and the other evidence, linked Luke to Valerie's death. The body was taken to the forensic medical examiner's office for an autopsy and identification. Unfortunately for Valeria's parent, they had to face the devastating news that the body found behind their house was indeed their daughter Valerie. Not only did Valerie and Luke live in the house, but also Luke's parents and his younger brother, Sam. Detectives searched the property and found landscaping tools belonging to Sam in the barn, which had been used to dig the grave site. A device used to consume an illegal substance was also found in the barn. Investigations revealed Sam's use of a banned substance, previously mentioned by Valerie. Police now suspect Sam's involvement in Valerie's death. A .45 caliber handgun, purchased by Luke in 2015, was found in his parents' bedroom. Luke's parents claimed ignorance, but this is hard to believe. Upon further searches by investigators around the same time of Valerie's burial site discovery, Luke was located alongside his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke T-Man was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. He told investigators that his wife, Valerie, had died almost a month ago, on August 25th, from an overdose of illegal substances. However, Luke claimed that he had not informed Valerie's parents about her death because he did not want them to know that she was using illegal substances. According to Luke, he did not call 911 after Valerie's death because he knew it would be pointless, as she was already dead. Instead, he left her body in bed until evening, when it got dark outside. He then wrapped her in a blanket, left a note, and took her to the woods behind their house, where he and his brother, Sam, dug a hole and buried her. Luke claimed that Valerie had not suffered any physical injuries before her death. However, the autopsy results revealed that Luke was lying. No traces of banned substances were found in Valerie's blood, only prescription drugs. Moreover, the autopsy showed that Valerie's cause of death was 2 bullet wounds, one to the head and one to the neck. The ballistics examination revealed that the bullets were fired from a .45 caliber handgun, which matched the gun found in Luke's parents' bedroom during a search. Luke admitted to buying the gun about a year ago, but claimed that he had purchased it for his father. Luke T-Man was accused of killing his 34-year-old wife, Valerie T-Man. During the investigation, the police found no evidence to suggest that his parents or younger brother were involved in the crime. However, Luke claimed that his brother Sam helped him bury Valerie's body. The police disputed this, stating that Sam was not at home at the time of the incident. It remains unclear whether Luke's parents knew about or were involved in Valerie's death, but it is peculiar that they didn't hear the gunshots. The trial against Luke began on April 2, 2018, in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan, Maine. Luke pleaded not guilty, claiming that someone had framed him. He argued that he wouldn't have left incriminating evidence like an engagement ring and a note near the body. However, forensic examinations linked all the items found with Valerie's body to Luke T-Man. A computer forensics expert testified that Valerie's phone was last used on August 25, 2016, the day police believe she died. The detective explained how phone records help investigators track a person's location. Records showed Valerie called Luke 31 times on the day he was with his new girlfriend. Luke only answered the last call, which lasted 13 minutes. Police believe he was home by the time the call ended the next morning. During the trial, Luke's brother Sam testified against him, prompting the defense to question the phone records. Luke initially told police that Sam helped him bury Valerie's body, but Sam denied this in court. Sam had an alibi, working 2 hours away, which his work log supported. Prosecution witnesses painted a picture of the private life of Luke and Valerie. It was revealed that Luke had told police that his PTSD could trigger rages that he would later forget. Court testimony showed that Luke and Valerie regularly used multiple types of illegal substances, and that Luke had claimed he was getting divorced around the time of Valerie's disappearance. The ex-girlfriend of Sam's brother testified about seeing Luke and Valerie use various substances together, despite the image they projected of having a healthy relationship. Members of the evidence response team testified about their findings at the Tiemans' home. Luke's defense team quickly objected to some items, including gardening tools found in a shed near the property and a .45 caliber handgun obtained from one of the rooms in the home. Stephen Smith, Tiemans' defense attorney, argued that the state assumed the gun and ammo were used by T-Man because they were found in the home. However, he pointed out that they never verified who the items actually belonged to, suggesting that someone else in the house may have had use to them. On the 5th day of the trial, T-Man admitted to changing his story multiple times, stating that he told investigators several different versions to protect his parents. He claimed that the detectives forced him to give false testimony and that he had no motive to take his wife's life. Furthermore, he stated that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the crime scene. Prosecutors presented a strong clue against Luke T-Man, stating that he was the only person who could have harmed Valerie and that all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before delivering a guilty verdict on May 11, 2018. At the sentencing hearing, Valerie's mother expressed her outrage and grief, stating that Tiemans' denial of the crime was appalling and that he deserved a life sentence in prison. Tiemans' mother, on the other hand, pleaded with the court to consider her son's entire life and to balance justice with mercy. T-Man became emotional as his parents begged the judge for leniency. His mother, Laurel, explained that her son had changed after serving 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that she was not using his post-traumatic stress disorder as an excuse, but rather seeking understanding. Ultimately, T-Man was sentenced to 55 years in prison, which was less than the life sentence that Valerie's parents had hoped for. T-Man appealed the decision, but it was unsuccessful. While in prison, he changed his testimony again, but this did not help his case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michelle Anglin. Michelle Anglin was born on November 27, 1973, in Fountain Valley, California. Later, her family moved to Arizona, where she was raised by her mother, Peggy, and stepfather, Larry McCall. Michelle had 2 older sisters, Cindy and Christina. When Michelle was around 20 years old, she started dating Hudson England, and their relationship blossomed. They made each other happy, and when Hudson proposed, Michelle accepted without hesitation. In late 1995, they got married in a joyous ceremony surrounded by their families and friends. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, was also a realtor. According to Michelle's mother, it was she who inspired Michelle to enter the real estate industry. Michelle's family would regularly keep in touch with her via her work phone when she was in the office. When showing houses to clients, Michelle always carried a pager, allowing her loved ones to reach her if needed. However, on February 9, 1996, Michelle did not respond to calls and messages from her family. She would usually inform someone about her plans to show a house to a potential buyer. The job of a realtor can be fraught with risk, often exceeding that of other professions. This is due in part to the nature of their work, which often involves working alone and visiting isolated locations to show properties. Predators often target realtors, luring them to empty homes with false intentions, such as feigning interest in buying a house. Once the realtor is alone and vulnerable, the predator can take advantage of the situation. Concern for this inherent danger led Michelle's family to become worried when they couldn't contact her during the day. Michelle's sister Cindy sought assistance from her boyfriend, a member of the Phoenix police, who offered to perform a welfare check on Michelle. When he visited her workplace, he discovered Michelle's parked car, which seemed undisturbed. When Cindy's boyfriend entered the office, he found the lights on and music playing. However, a closer look revealed that Michelle's personal belongings, including her purse and pager, were still on a table in the unlocked office. This raised questions about why she had left in such a hurry, abandoning her belongings behind. That evening, Michelle's family filed a missing persons report with the police. Earlier that day, Michelle had an appointment with a potential buyer to show them 3 houses near her office. Since the houses were close to her office, she decided not to use her car. When the police arrived, they inspected Michelle's office and then visited the 3 houses she might have shown the buyer. During their initial search, they found 3 pink buttons in the master closet on the 2nd floor of one of the houses. They also noticed that 2 candles in the master bathroom had been knocked over, one into each sink, but everything else seemed undisturbed. Cindy's boyfriend asked her about Michelle's outfit, as police found buttons they suspected belonged to her. Cindy couldn't recall. A search of the houses, especially where the buttons were found, led to a tragic discovery that Michelle's body under the master bed. Investigation revealed seminal fluid, broken candlesticks, Michelle's clothes, and paint and plaster chips under the bed and in the bathroom. The forensic examination found no evidence of forced intimate contact before Michelle's death. However, it suggested the perpetrator intended to do so, undressing Michelle despite her resistance. Bruises on her neck indicated she was strangled while fighting back. The violent confrontation occurred in the master closet and bath, as shown by scattered buttons, seminal fluid, damaged candles, and broken ceramic chips. During the attack, Michelle's clothing was torn off, as evident by her tattered and interwoven clothes. Her body showed multiple signs of the intense struggle, numerous bruises and abrasions on her body, defensive wounds on her hands and wrists. Michelle's desperate fight to defend herself against her assailant ultimately proved futile. After her daughter's death, Peggy spoke out about the safety concerns facing women who work alone, including real estate agents in model homes and open houses. As a result of her vocal advocacy, Peggy claims to have been fired from her job. The police's first lead in the investigation was Michelle's husband, Hudson England. It's standard procedure for law enforcement to initially investigate family members to determine if they were involved in the crime. Michelle's family, however, did not suspect Hudson, as they were a happy couple who had married just 4 months prior to her death. Nevertheless, the investigators decided to look into Hudson's alibi. When questioned by the police, Hudson appeared genuinely distraught over Michelle's death. He claimed to have spent the day visiting several car dealerships in search of a family vehicle, as they were planning to start a family. The police verified his alibi and found it to be true, ultimately ruling him out as a suspect. During the investigation, he stated that he had no idea who would want to harm Michelle and speculated that she was likely attacked by someone she was showing a house to. To further investigate, the police reviewed Michelle's phone records and discovered that on February 9th, between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m., she was on a call with a fellow sales agent. Michelle abruptly ended the call, stating that a potential buyer had arrived at the subdivision. The fellow agent attempted to call Michelle back between 4:30 and 5 p.m., but the calls went unanswered. This information allowed detectives to narrow down the time frame of the attack, but they still needed to identify the person Michelle was supposed to meet. Unfortunately, Michelle had not mentioned the potential buyer's name during the phone conversation, nor had she written it in her work notes, leaving the police without any immediate leads on the identity of the mysterious individual. The police investigation into the attack on Michelle involved interviewing people who lived in the area where the incident occurred. One resident, who happened to be returning home from work between 4 o'clock and 4:45 p.m. on February 9th, reported seeing a white man coming down the steps of one of the 3 houses for sale in the neighborhood. This witness also noticed a black, full-sized, older model Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates parked in the lot of the house. Additionally, several potential buyers who visited the subdivision that day between 4 o'clock and 4:30 p.m. reported seeing a man walking from the direction of the second and third model homes. They also observed that candlesticks in the master bathroom of the third model home had been knocked over into the sinks. Kim Ramos, a young real estate sales associate from a nearby subdivision, contacted the police after hearing the news. She reported that on February 9th, the same day Michelle's body was found at around 2 p.m., she had met with a potential buyer who drove an old black Chevrolet pickup truck. Kim found it suspicious that he was interested in a $500,000 house, but drove a vehicle that suggested a more modest lifestyle. When Kim accompanied he to a 2-story house, supposedly to answer his questions, she became uneasy. He stood too close to her and casually touched her hand several times, making her wary. After spending only a brief time with him, Kim returned to the sales office, feeling that his questions about the house, such as the type of flooring and the possibility of adding a 4th bedroom, seemed unnecessary and even foolish. Miss Ramos played a crucial role in the investigation by asking the suspicious client to fill out a guest registration card, which he reluctantly completed. The client, who claimed to be James Adams, provided his real home address and phone number. When police visited the address, they spotted a black Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates parked outside. The truck was registered to 32-year-old James Van Adams, who was not at home at the time. Police took photos of the truck and showed them to Kim, who confirmed that it was the same vehicle driven by the suspicious client she had met just hours before Michelle's death. Further investigation into James Van Adams' background revealed that Adams was a 32-year-old man who was currently separated from his wife and had a child. He had a prior conviction in California for a crime committed in 1990. In that case, Adams had targeted Melissa Cunningham, a petite sales agent who was working alone at an apartment complex. He had asked her to show him model homes that were still under construction, specifically expressing interest in a 2-story home with a master bedroom and bathroom upstairs. This event further increased suspicions about Adams. Investigating Michelle England's death led detectives to quickly uncover a previous failed attack by James Adams. They obtained a search and arrest warrant, returned to Adams' home, and took him in for questioning. However, Adams refused to cooperate, appeared nervous, and had noticeable injuries on his face, including under his eye. The detective suspected that these injuries might have been sustained when Michelle defended herself with the missing candlesticks, which were later found. As a result, they collected DNA, blood, and hair samples from Adams. A witness, Kim Ramos, identified him and reported that he had no visible injuries on his face during their meeting. Adams claimed his injuries came from working on his pickup truck, but work records showed he left early on February 9th and didn't return, citing car troubles. When seen next, he had a new facial injury and black eye, which his employer and coworker said weren't there before. The police analysis of Adams' DNA, blood, and hair samples is detailed in court documents, which also reference a sample of seminal fluid found on the carpet in the closet. The Phoenix Crime Lab and DPS Lab conducted DNA testing on a carpet sample. Initially, results excluded James Van Adams, but retesting by the crime lab and further testing included him as a contributor. Despite the police taking extensive fingerprint and footprint evidence from the model home, none of the prints matched Adams. Adams was charged with the murder of Michelle England and denied any involvement in the crime. His trial began on July 1, 1997. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence that they claimed linked Adams to Michelle's death. One key witness was Kim Ramos, who believed she had narrowly escaped being attacked by Adams herself. Ramos testified that Adams had shown suspicious behavior, including wearing casual clothing, driving an old vehicle, and asking unusual questions about the house's flooring and fourth bedroom. Prosecutors also presented evidence of Adams' interactions with other sales agents in California and Broward, which they claimed showed a pattern of suspicious behavior. Susan Wright, an employee, met with Adams multiple times. Their first meeting was in September or October 1995, when Adams asked Wright to show him a house. Wright recalled Adams standing too close and not asking questions about the house. On November 5, 1995, James Van Adams visited Susan's office again, signing in as Jim Adams. This was not an incident, as Adams had repeatedly visited her office and called her, asking her out on dates. A pattern of behavior emerged, revealing Adams' deliberate plan of action. Adams targeted women with similar characteristics, attacking them in California in 1990. Victims Michelle, Susan Wright, Kim Ramos, and Melissa Cunningham worked alone in shared physical traits. Attacks occurred in the afternoon, with Adams often asking victims to accompany him upstairs in a two-story house. He used a similar method, putting his right arm around their necks, ripping off their clothes, and attempting to assault them. The trial was a challenging experience for Michelle's family, who were present throughout the proceedings. The judge had to invite Michelle's mother to go out from the courtroom because she was overcome with emotion and yelled at Adams. However, Adams appeared to take pleasure in the family's distress, occasionally flashing a grin. Nevertheless, his demeanor changed when the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts on July 14, 1997, and he was subsequently sentenced to death. Following the sentencing, Adams launched a series of appeals, claiming he was innocent. In his appeal, he argued that a previous incident in California in 1990, in which Melissa Cunningham escaped, supported his claim that he did not intentionally try to kill Michelle. Adams alleged that during the California attack, he had simply restrained his victim by the neck in an attempt to make intimate contact. He insisted that this incident demonstrated that he did not plan to kill Michelle, and the jury should have considered this when reaching their verdict. James Van Adams' attempts to appeal his death sentence were denied, and on March 14, 2005, he took his own life while in prison. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was asphyxia, consistent with suicide. The news of his death brought relief to the family of Michelle. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim, with an older brother named Josh. The siblings developed a strong bond as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family relocated from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was an active member of the school band and played the drums. Sarah was passionate about music, especially drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly played at jam sessions in Redding. As one of the few female drummers, she stood out on stage. When Sarah was 18, she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota with her mother and brother after her parents got divorced. There, she continued to play drums at different venues and eventually met Bernard Allison, a famous blues guitarist and singer. Allison was impressed with her skills and invited her to join him on stage occasionally. By the time Sarah turned 19, she had become a local celebrity among blues fans, known for her bright smile, which earned her the nickname Ronald McDonald. Meanwhile, her brother Josh was struggling with depression and mental health issues after their parents' divorce. Tragically, on an ordinary day in February 2016, the police arrived at their doorstep and delivered devastating news to Sarah's mother. Josh took his own life at the age of 20, leaving his loved ones, especially his mother Sarah, heartbroken. The bond between Sarah and Josh was incredibly strong, and his passing devastated her. To cope with her loss and to help others who struggle with mental health, Sarah decided to study psychology. She had been in touch with Nico Carson Major, who lived in the Netherlands, and she moved there to pursue her studies. At Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Sarah began her psychology program with Nico's support, who not only helped her navigate her grief but also assisted her with her studies as a native speaker. Sarah's passion for music never faded despite her focus on studies and work. She stayed in touch with Bernard Allison, a musician she had performed with, and shared her dream of buying a drum kit. In January 2017, Bernard's band toured Europe, and on Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended Bernard's concert in Germany with Nico. Bernard spotted her in the audience, invited her on stage, and let her play the drums with them, just like old times. Sarah lived on the third floor of an apartment complex near the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she planned to spend Christmas in the United States and booked a flight for a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, her life took a devastating turn. When a police officer appeared at her doorstep, just like in 2016 when her son had passed away, Sarah's legs began to shake. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, but couldn't bear the thought of losing another loved one. When the officer informed Sarah's mother that her daughter had passed away, she was overcome with grief and lost consciousness. This devastating news came just a year after the loss of her son, who had died at the age of 20. Sarah was only 21 years old. Sarah lived in a student complex on the third floor, where she rented an apartment with her roommate, Joel Schelling. Joel was also a musician, and music was the common interest that brought them together. Unlike Sarah, who was outgoing and always smiling, Joel was more reserved and had a temper. Despite their occasional quarrels, Sarah remained a supportive friend to Joel, often calming him down when he became angry. However, the situation took a turn for the worse over time. Just 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor that she was afraid of Joel, who had threatened to harm 3 people he disliked. Sarah knew she had to go to the police. Just a couple of days before her death, she had spoken to her mother on the phone about her concerns. Sarah's roommate, Joel, was behaving in a way that was increasingly bothering her. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live as soon as possible and to avoid Joel until she could move out. On December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., the police received a call from Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors, who reported hearing a loud fight and then Sarah screaming. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah died from her injuries. The police immediately began searching for Joel, who was nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported that he had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a large double bass with him. This distinctive instrument became a key detail in the police's description of Joel. Less than 2 hours after the crime, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. He was on his way to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. After Joel was arrested, he made a shocking confession to his mother while on the train. He told her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge subsequently placed Joel under arrest for 14 days to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducting the autopsy on Sarah's body found 27 stab wounds, with several of them on her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah passed away, her mother, Doni Odegaard, traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned home. However, this required raising $40,000, a task that was made possible by the generosity of strangers who cared for the family. Upon learning of Joel's arrest, Doni Odegaard inquired if her daughter had contacted the police. Sarah had instead reached out to social workers, who visited Joel and found him calm. However, the next day, Sarah again contacted social services due to Joel's erratic behavior, including hitting himself with a hammer and threatening to harm multiple people. The case against Schelling began in March 2019. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Pappenheim's death and admitted his guilt. However, he claimed he did not remember the actual act of taking her life. According to Schelling, he recalled fighting with Sarah, but his next memory was of being in the shower, cleaning himself. Sarah's mother, Doni Odegaard, attended each hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. However, when asked if these voices had instructed him to fight with Sarah, Schelling said he did not know and could not recall. He also could not remember the cause of their fight. Prior to the verdict, experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple disorders and required long-term treatment. Despite this, they concluded that Schelling was responsible for Sarah's death. The verdict was announced in December 2019. Sarah Pappenheim's death occurred before she could receive a response to her second request for support, after her initial request for assistance from social workers went unresponded due to the specialist's unavailability. The medics concluded that Schelling was aware of the initial fight and scuffle with Sarah and had the opportunity to either stop the altercation or grab the knife. By choosing the latter, he should be held accountable for his actions. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence, but the judge in Rotterdam gave Schelling a 6-year prison term, followed by an indefinite sentence in a psychiatric hospital. The court reduced the sentence from 10 years due to Schelling's relatively young age and his significantly diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime. This means that the court did not consider Schelling fully responsible for his actions. When handing down the sentence, the court released a detailed explanation stating that, although the crime was severe and unpredictable, Schelling's serious psychological disorders made it likely that he would commit another violent crime. The court noted that Schelling suffers from chronic psychological disorders that require ongoing treatment in a clinical setting. The court viewed psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has expressed a willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. The court has ruled that Schelling will remain in treatment until it determines he is well enough to be released. The court will review his status every 2 years. Additionally, Schelling has been ordered to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard is outraged by the sentence, believing it is too lenient. She thinks Schelling should have received a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. In her opinion, Schelling would have faced a much harsher sentence in the US, such as life imprisonment or the death penalty, which would have prevented him from committing a similar crime in the future. She is also concerned that Schelling may be eligible for parole in as little as 4 years and vowed to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers who had interacted with Sarah. The investigation concluded that the social workers could not be held accountable for failing to identify Schelling's disorders because they did not possess the necessary expertise to make such a diagnosis. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin-Craft. Christina Rose Carlin-Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlincraft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anakin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17th, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Cayatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21st. On August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25th, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlincraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardor police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone, and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin Craft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin Craft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Zoe Nelson. Zoe Nelson was born on August 13, 1992, in Wishaw, Scotland. At the time of the incident, she lived with her mother, stepfather, and 2 younger sisters in New Mains, a village near Wishaw. Zoe was a student at Motherwell College and was well liked by her peers. However, Zoe's life was complicated by a rivalry with her 16-year-old sister Laura Ann, who was also involved with the same boyfriend. This led to tension between the sisters. On May 22, 2010, the situation escalated when Laura Ann saw Zoe talking to a 20-year-old man named Robert Bain outside their home. Laura Ann became upset and confronted Zoe, leading to a physical fight. Their mother, Marianne Nelson, intervened, telling Zoe to leave. Zoe obeyed and did not go back home. Later that night, around 11 p.m., locals reported seeing someone starting a fire in a nearby wooded area known as Monkey Hill. The smell of smoke drifted to nearby homes, but no one suspected anything out of the ordinary at the time. A local resident, Stuart Bell, found a charred body in woods near home on May 23, damaged in fire. As news of the discovery spread, the police cordoned off the area and began investigating. Zoe's family had been trying to contact her since the previous day and were informed of the discovery. Her mother, Mary Ann Nelson, reported her daughter's disappearance to the police. Mary Ann Nelson described Zoe as a typical 17-year-old with many friends. The family appealed to the public for any information that could assist the police in their investigation. The investigation into Zoe's death involved an in-depth examination of the crime scene. This took several days to complete and required the efforts of at least 50 police officers. On May 26, police shared a crucial piece of surveillance footage showing Zoe visiting a local store just hours before her death. This footage was essential to the investigation, as it allowed police to reconstruct Zoe's final hours and ultimately piece together the events leading to her death. A key piece of evidence was found at the crime scene: that a distinctive red plastic sombrero cap from a Sierra Silver tequila bottle, which was discovered near Zoe's body. On the other side of a small walkway, police found an empty tequila bottle. Forensic experts later determined that Zoe's body had likely been exposed to fire for approximately 7 hours. The official cause of her death was undetermined. By May 28, police collected witness statements, including one who saw a violent, intoxicated man with Zoe and another who saw her with a man with a tattooed face. On May 28, 20-year-old Robert Bain walked into the police station, appearing heavily intoxicated and slurring his words, to make a statement. He claimed to have been in Motherwell a few days prior and mentioned that a man named Stuart Campbell had gotten on the bus with him during his return trip. When Robert Bain was formally arrested, he claimed that the last time he saw Zoe Nelson was on the morning of May 22, when he ran into her by chance at the local newsstand where he had gone to buy cigarettes. A DNA test was conducted on a swab taken from Zoe's hand, which revealed the presence of her own DNA, as well as DNA from another person that matched Bain's DNA. The forensic expert explained that the DNA found on the bottle cap likely came from both Zoe and Bain drinking from the bottle and then putting the cap back on. The scientific evidence suggests that Bain's DNA was deposited on Zoe's right palm and between her fingers. Robert Bain was accused of causing Zoe Nelson's death based on multiple eyewitness accounts and DNA evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty and acted defiantly, even confronting one of the investigators. He also denied a previous altercation with Zoe. The trial of Robert Bain began on March 1, 2011, where he claimed to be innocent. However, Zoe's teenage friends testified that Zoe had told them a week before her death that her injuries were from a fight with Robert Bain. Zoe had confided in her friends that Bain was controlling, unstable, and prone to anger over minor issues, and that he restricted her from socializing with some of her friends. Although Zoe's relationship with Robert Bain was not serious, given that he had only been out of prison for 2 months, he had a significant influence over her. Moreover, Bain also had a romantic relationship with Zoe's 16-year-old sister, Laura Ann, who was equally involved with him as her sister Zoe. Before Zoe's body was found, Laura Ann already knew her sister was dead, a secret she kept for 5 days. During the trial, it was revealed that Bain had taken Laura Ann to the location of her sister's body, a fact the police had not previously disclosed. Laura Ann described the morning of May 23, the day after her argument with Zoe. She went to Bain's address to return some clothes, and when she arrived, she found him nervous and drinking vodka. He then took her to a location where he showed her something. Laura Ann recognized the body as her sister's due to the ranger's tattoo on her arm. According to her testimony, Bain confessed to hitting Zoe, losing his temper when she fought back, and ultimately taking her life. He then attempted to destroy evidence of the crime by using gasoline. On March 25, 2011, a jury composed delivered a guilty verdict, which was unanimous. When the verdict was announced at the High Court in Edinburgh, Bain became enraged and had to be physically restrained. The court had to be temporarily cleared and officers intervened to restore order after Bain directed insults and threats towards Zoe Nelson's family. After a 20-minute break, Judge Lady Dorian decided to continue the trial without Robert Bain present. Bain was found not guilty of stealing alcohol from an Asda store, disorderly conduct, and stealing Zoe's cell phone. He was also acquitted of threatening a police officer. However, on April 27, 2011, Bain was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years for murdering Zoe Nelson. He received an additional 6 years for obstructing justice. Both sentenced will be served at the same time. Judge Lady Dorian told Bain that this was a horrific crime with truly shocking circumstances. Zoe's aunt Shirley Nelson expressed disappointment with the 20-year minimum sentence, saying a life sentence should mean life in prison. The family is grateful for support but must come to terms with never seeing Zoe again, whose life was cut short by Robert Bain's evil actions. Zoe's uncle, Stephen Hines, spoke on behalf of the family after the verdict was delivered. He stated that Bain got what he deserved. Hines also mentioned that Bain's reaction in court was telling of his threatening nature. Bain is a menace, he knows he's guilty, and that's all that matters, Hines said that. Bain showed no remorse for his actions. The verdict shows that Bain is a danger to society. With him behind bars, the community is safer, and hopefully, the Nelson family can begin to heal, knowing that justice has been served. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Harvey. Donald Harvey was born on April 15, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, to Ray and Goldie Donald. He was the oldest of 3 children and was affectionately known as Donnie by his parents. Following his birth, the family relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, a small community in the Appalachian Mountains. Despite struggling with poverty, they was loving and nurturing to their children. However, their marriage began to deteriorate due to their economic struggles. As a child, Donald was quiet and mostly kept to himself, showing no apparent signs of abnormality. However, he suffered a traumatic past, being sexually abused and assaulted by at least 3 men. The perpetrators included his uncle on his mother's side, who molested him during visits to his grandmother's home, and an older neighbor who offered him money for sexual favors. Additionally, at the age of 18, Donald claimed to have been sexually assaulted by his roommate, Randy White. While a traumatic past can contribute to the development of psychological issues, Donald was often perceived as a loner in school. He preferred to focus on his studies and rarely participated in extracurricular activities, opting to read instead. Although this helped him earn good grades, it also led to teasing and the label of teacher's pet. After graduating from Sturgeon Elementary School, Donald enrolled in Boonville High School in 1968. Despite his good academic record, he soon found himself bored with the daily routine and decided to drop out. However, he eventually earned his diploma through a correspondence school in Chicago and received his general education development at the age of 16. With no clear future plans, Donald struggled to figure out his life's direction. He eventually moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he landed a job at a local factory. However, when the factory closed down in 1970, Donald lost his job and was left uncertain about his future. Around that time, his mother called and asked him to visit his ailing grandfather, who was in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Donald agreed to the visit. During his daily visits to see his ailing grandfather, Donald formed strong relationships with the hospital workers, who grew to genuinely like him. Their admiration for him led to an unexpected job offer. Although it is unclear what motivated Donald to want to work as a nurse's aide, some speculate that he needed to earn a living after losing his previous job. Despite lacking formal training in nursing or medicine, the hospital staff entrusted him with responsibilities. Donald's job at the hospital involved caring for patients on his own, including tasks like changing bedpans, inserting catheters, and giving medications. Despite the challenges, Donald's early weeks at the hospital passed without incident. However, on the evening of May 31, 1970, Donald was attending to 88-year-old stroke patient Logan Evans in a private room. Suddenly, Evans rubbed his own feces on Donald's face. While it's likely Evans wasn't fully aware of his actions due to the effects of his stroke, the incident triggered something within Donald, leading him to completely lose control. Without realizing what he was doing, Donald suffocated Evans with a blue plastic bag and a pillow until the patient was motionless. He then checked Evans' pulse with a stethoscope to confirm his death. Following the killing, Donald disposed of the plastic bag, cleaned Evans' body, dressed him in a fresh gown, and showered him before notifying the nurses about the patient's passing. After the first incident, no one suspected anything out of the ordinary. Donald went to cover the patient with a sheet, but instead, he used his hand to smother him to death. It was surprising that he was able to do this without anyone noticing, especially since he used a pillow to kill him. The next day, Donald was assigned to care for another elderly patient, 69-year-old James Tyree. He made a critical mistake by using the wrong size catheter on him. When James realized what was happening, he yelled at Donald to remove it. Donald used his hand to restrain him, which caused him to vomit blood and eventually die from an air embolism. Once again, no one suspected foul play. With no one suspecting him of any wrongdoing after his first 2 murders, he became more confident and careless. Just 3 weeks after the first murder, Donald deliberately cut off the oxygen tank of 42-year-old patient Elizabeth Wyatt. He later claimed that he had ended her suffering, as she had expressed a desire to die. A nurse found Elizabeth dead 4 hours later, but no one questioned Donald about her death. Over the next 10 months, he took advantage of the lack of suspicion and killed 15 more patients under his care. He saw this as an opportunity to indulge his darker impulses, and he continued to kill without being detected. Donald's methods of murder varied widely, driven by a desire for pleasure or experimentation. He would often use smothering, sabotage oxygen tanks, inject lethal drugs, or overdose patients with medication. When angered, his methods became even more brutal. On one occasion, he inserted a coat hanger through a patient's catheter after an argument, puncturing the patient's bladder and bowel, which led to infection and death a few days later. Despite the brutality of his actions, Donald considered himself a mercy killer, the self-proclaimed angel of death who was playing God with vulnerable patients. He cloaked his horrific deeds in a mask of kindness, believing that his actions were somehow merciful. On March 31, 1971, the day he was arrested for burglary while drunk, Donald's life took a turn. In his incoherent confession, he revealed his dark secret to the police, but no one took him seriously. As a result, he faced only charges of petty theft and paid a fine instead of serving prison time. This close call prompted Donald to attempt to turn his life around. For a few months, he tried to regain stability and eventually landed a part-time job as a nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. In June 1973, Donald started a second nursing job at Good Samaritan Hospital in Lexington. He held both nursing positions simultaneously before eventually moving on. Between August 1974 and September 1975, he took on 2 non-nursing roles, a telephone operator in Lexington and a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Notably, Donald was able to resist his urge to kill during this period. A possible explanation is that he had limited access to patients in these new roles, which may have also contributed to his decision to change jobs frequently. Donald's struggle to control his killing urges eventually became too much to manage, leading him to relocate to Cincinnati, Ohio in September 1975. He found employment at the Cincinnati VA Medical Hospital, working various roles including nursing assistant, housekeeping aide, and autopsy assistant. The hospital's night shift schedule and lack of supervision gave him unrestricted access to all areas of the hospital. Over the next decade, Donald murdered at least 15 patients while working at the hospital. He meticulously documented each crime in a diary, detailing the methods he used to kill his victims. These methods included poisoning patients' food and drinks, suffocating them with plastic bags and towels, and injecting them with lethal substances. Donald's experimentation with different methods was influenced by his study of medical journals, which he used to refine his techniques and avoid detection. Donald preferred cyanide as his method of murder, which he mixed into patients' food or administered through their gastric tubes. He accumulated a large stash of cyanide, approximately 30 pounds, which he stole from the hospital over time and kept at home for safekeeping. He stated that he began using morphine to kill patients in the 1970s, particularly in small hospitals in Kentucky where it was not heavily regulated. He also mentioned he used other methods, such as cyanide, arsenic, adhesive cleaner, and suffocation with a plastic bag. Despite the numerous deaths, he claimed to have avoided suspicion by making them appear accidental or due to natural causes. He revealed that in reality, he was a serial killer hiding in plain sight, preying on vulnerable patients. He took it upon himself to decide who lived or died, often without the patients' or their families' consent. He justified his actions as merciful, but he acknowledged that the truth was more complex. While he claimed that his crimes were motivated by compassion, other evidence suggested otherwise. He recounted that a turning point came in the early 1980s when his behavior became more erratic and driven by rage. He started dating a man named Doug Hill, but their relationship was tumultuous. After a heated argument, he poisoned Doug's ice cream with arsenic, and fortunately, Doug survived. This incident marked the first time he tried to harm someone outside of the hospital, revealing a darker side to his nature. Donald's behavior took a dark turn after a fight with Carl Heller. He moved in with Carl Heller, but the relationship quickly became toxic. Donald's jealousy and paranoia led him to suspect Heller of cheating, and he started lacing Carl's food with arsenic to keep her from leaving. As time passed, Donald's cruel actions extended beyond his home. He poisoned a female neighbor's drink with hepatitis serum during an argument, and she almost died before receiving treatment. Unfortunately, another neighbor, Helen Metzger, was not as fortunate. Donald poisoned one of her pies with arsenic, which ultimately led to her death. Donald's lack of consequences for his crimes emboldened him, and he became more confident and reckless. He felt like he was above the law, having gotten away with multiple murders. In April 1983, Donald's behavior escalated. After a disagreement with Heller's parents, he began secretly poisoning their food with small doses of arsenic. The following month, Carl's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. During a visit, Donald saw an opportunity to strike again and laced Henry's pudding with arsenic. Henry died that night. Over the next year, Donald continued to target Carl's mother, Margaret, periodically poisoning her in an attempt to kill her. In January 1984, Donald's relationship with his partner, Carl, ended, and he was asked to leave their home. Donald reacted poorly to the breakup and spent the next 2 years trying to harm Carl using poison. He also attempted to kill one of Carl's female friends in a separate incident, but was unsuccessful. Although Donald did manage to hospitalize Carl at one point, his attempts to kill her ultimately failed. Donald's behavior raised suspicions on July 18, 1985, when security guards at his workplace discovered a suspicious collection of items in his gym bag. The contents included a gun, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a cocaine spoon, medical texts, occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sawbridge. As a result of the discovery, Donald was fined $50 for carrying a firearm on federal property and given the option to resign from his job quietly. Surprisingly, the incident was not documented in his work record, and the hospital did not investigate Donald for potential involvement in other crimes during his employment. He was able to secure a new job as a part-time nurse's aide at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati just 7 months later, in February 1986. Donald Harvey's new employers were impressed by his work and soon offered him a full-time position at the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, Donald had a dark past, and he quickly fell back into his old routine. Over the next 13 months, he murdered 26 more patients and attempted to kill several others by tampering with their life support machines, injecting them with lethal substances, and suffocating them. The murder spree finally came to an end on March 7, 1987, with the death of 44-year-old John Powell. Powell had been recovering from a motorcycle accident, but his sudden and mysterious death raised suspicions. Due to Ohio's law requiring an autopsy in cases of vehicular homicide, the authorities were able to investigate Powell's death. During the autopsy, the assistant coroner detected a faint scent of almonds, a sign of cyanide poisoning. This discovery led the authorities to launch an investigation into Powell's death. Initially, they suspected Powell's friends and family, but they found no evidence or motive. The focus then shifted to hospital employees who had access to Powell's room, and Donald Harvey was one of the individuals they needed to rule out. Hospital employees were voluntarily taking polygraph tests to clear their names. Donald Harvey also was offered to take a test, but he didn't follow through. Instead, he called in sick on the day of his scheduled test. He had even purchased a book on how to cheat on lie detector tests. This raised suspicions, especially when investigators discovered his notorious nickname, Angel of Death, and learned about his questionable partner from the hospital. As the investigation continued, authorities focused on Donald due to the unusual number of deaths surrounding him. During questioning, Donald initially denied any involvement in John Powell's murder, claiming he was just a victim of circumstance. However, after hours of interrogation, he eventually confessed to putting cyanide in Powell's feeding tube. He claimed he did it out of sympathy for Powell and his family, but denied responsibility for the other suspicious deaths. Donald was taken into custody, and investigators began searching for more evidence. On August 11, 1987, Donald, then 35, confessed to committing 33 murders over the past 17 years. As the investigation continued, the number of murders he confessed to grew to 70. Donald's claims of multiple murders raised suspicions among investigators, who questioned the accuracy of the numbers he provided. To verify his credibility, they ordered a series of psychiatric evaluations by multiple experts. The tests concluded that Donald was sane and competent, able to distinguish right from wrong and conform to the law. In 1987, Donald was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the murders committed at Mary's Mount Hospital. The following year, he pleaded guilty to 3 additional murders and 3 attempted murders in Cincinnati, receiving 3 life sentences and 3 terms of 7 to 25 years. After a 2-year investigation, the remaining cases were closed due to insufficient evidence linking Donald to the crimes. The public was both shocked by Donald's actions, and many wondered what drove him to commit such heinous crimes. In a 1991 interview with the Columbus Dispatch, Donald revealed that his motivation stemmed from a desire for control. He felt that others had controlled him for 18 years, and he sought to reclaim power over his own life. Donald admitted that he enjoyed the sense of power that came with deciding who lived or died. Donald Harvey is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history, not only due to the high number of victims, but also because he targeted people he knew personally, including his patients. An Associated Press article from 2001 listed him as the worst serial killer in the United States. Contrary to expectations that Donald would spend the rest of his life in prison and die of natural causes, his life took a different turn. On March 28, 2017, Donald was found severely beaten in his cell at the Toledo Correctional Institution, where he was being held in protective custody. He died 2 days later from severe head injuries. Months later, an inmate named James Elliott confessed to the crime in a letter to the Toledo Blade. James, who was serving a 37-year sentence for multiple burglaries, claimed that he had committed the murder to bring closure to the families of Donald's victims, who were from his hometown in Kentucky. In his letter, James wrote that he hoped his actions would bring some solace to the victims' families, as Donald had not received the punishment he deserved from the courts. In September 2019, James was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to the murder of the notorious Angel of Death.